back in open session of the City Council, or are we still in closed session? We need to adjourn that.
Correct. Closed session first.
We're back from closed session of City Council. And is there a motion to adjourn to open session?
I have to do roll call first.
Oh, roll call. There we go.
Yes. To open the closed session. So Councilmember Nierenheim is absent. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Here.
Councilmember Horvath.
Here.
Councilmember MD. Here. Mayor Brand is absent, and Mayor Pro Tem Obaji.
Here. All right. Do we have any announcements, City Manager Wazanski, about closed session actions?
Not this evening. No.
Thank you. And is there a motion to adjourn to regular meeting?
So moved.
All right, second it. Councilmember Lowenstein, the motion. Obaji with the second. Any objections? Nope. All right. We are adjourned to open session. Call to order regular session of the City Council. It's a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Nierenheim is absent. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Here.
Councilmember Horvath.
Here.
Councilmember MD. Here. Mayor Brown is absent, and Mayor Pro Tem Obaji.
I'm here. All right, and let's do a salute to our flag and a moment of silence. Please rise and ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh. All right. It's a solemn time in our nation right now as the President delivers a State of the Union. I appreciate the folks who are here with us right now and missing that. My heart goes out to the people in Ukraine, as well as all our troops on the front who are standing ready for anything that develops. Right. Let's presentations, proclamations, announcements. Do we have any? Start with Councilmember Horvath.
No announcements. I agree with your sentiment about Ukraine, and I also should mention that my heart goes out to the families in Texas having to deal with the edicts coming down from their governor related to trans kids. That's it.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
I agree on Ukraine as well. The announcement I have is that the District 2 March community meeting will be held 2 weeks from tomorrow night, March the 16th. From 6 to 7:30 on Zoom. You can sign up on my District 2 council page, and I'll be sending out an email soon to remind people of this. My special guest will be the new police chief, who will be announced later.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember MD.
And congratulations to the new police chief. And so that's exciting news. Also, don't forget, today's Fat Tuesday, so happy Mardi Gras to everybody. And actually, that was it. Thanks.
All right. I've got a few. I'd like to thank Lilo Mora Garcia because there was a unhoused person living on Artesia Boulevard at the bus bunch there next to the CVS. And there have been some concern on Facebook voiced about this person because he's a veteran. And she'd done a lot of outreach to him. And then she went and visited him again on a very cold day, and actually convinced him to come and join the pallet shelter and move to the pallet shelter. So that's a real success story. Her persistence pays off for the community. Thank you, Lila, tremendously for doing that. And it really warms people's hearts. So thank you. I'd like to announce my community meeting is tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. It'll be on Zoom. You can find a link to it on my City Council member page or else my Instagram and Facebook. And it should be an exciting one. We got a lot to discuss. And lastly, I read in the paper that Councilmember MD called District 4 not her circus. Well, Councilmember MD, I know there's a lot of civic engagement in District 4 right now. I welcome that. I don't hope for my constituents to be willing. So I take offense to that. But thank you for recognizing how lively our district is. That's all.
Just if you're going to mention that, I was just saying that I'm not involved in that whatsoever, and that's a District 4 issue, and District 5 has no opinion on what is going on in District 4. That's yours.
All right. We'll deal with that tomorrow.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I could add a presentation as well. Councilman Lowenstein mentioned we have a new police chief, so did Councilwoman MD. It is my pleasure tonight, and we'll do a more formal celebration when we're back in person, hopefully on April 5th. We'll get to more of that later as the month proceeds, but want to formally introduce and welcome new Police Chief Joe Hoffman. Joe shouldn't be a new face to most of the community. He's been with the city of Redondo Beach since 1994. He started his career in law enforcement as a police cadet and has worked his way up over the years. He's was promoted to lieutenant back in 2006. So he has roughly 16 years of police management experience with the department. He's worked virtually every functional tactical unit that we have in delivering service to the community. Joe is very well respected in the organization, and I am really excited to work with Joe and to bring him into this new position. Big shoes to fill. Joe knows Chief Hoffman did an outstanding job for us for many years and really brought the department into a new era of policing, community-oriented policing. Joe's looking forward to extending that and working on some other great initiatives as well. So, like I said, we'll do a formal badge pinning ceremony when we're all together in a room again, hopefully next month. But big welcome to Joe and congratulations. And you'll be hearing from him later tonight with a very an item on current crime trends. So thank you, Joe. Welcome. Job well done.
Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. And I've been with Redondo Beach now for 28 years, and it's an amazing city. And I've been very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with an incredible number of people and a whole series of police chiefs that have really exposed me to all the different aspects that Redondo Beach has to offer and made me a really well-rounded candidate. And I'm very, very excited about this opportunity to step into an organization that has such a solid foundation with such a focus on community outreach and increasing the trust and safety in our community. And I'm really looking forward to taking our department and doing everything that we can to make the quality of life better for all the residents, the employees, the staff, anybody that comes and visits the city of Redondo Beach. So thank you very much for the vote of confidence. I appreciate it. I'm very much looking forward to working with everyone in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hoffman, and thanks for your 28 years of dedicated service. You came to one of our community meetings a few months ago, I think maybe 6 months ago, back when the crime started to spike and folks loved meeting you and you handled it just like a chief. So I also thank City Manager Wazanski for choosing a chief from within our ranks. It really helps build morale and let people know that they're working towards something great. A great opportunity awaits them in the future potentially. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, congrats, Joe. We're excited to have you on board. Just a quick anecdote. I went home to visit my mom and family and friends in St. Louis this last weekend. Went to a barbecue place. My buddy was working there, and they had patches from about 40 different police departments around the country. And I go, "You need one from Redondo Beach," and he goes, "It's right there." Of all the municipalities in the country, we're well represented at a very popular barbecue restaurant. So the police department has a great reputation, and I'm excited for you to succeed, Chief Hoffman, and I know you'll do a terrific job, and you've been very involved in the police department. So onward and upward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the approval of the order of agenda. Are there any changes to the order of agenda that anybody proposes? Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Second that. All right, Councilmember Horvath with the motion, Obaji with the second. And any objection to the order of the agenda as presented on the agenda? Nope. All right, well, adopted in that order. Move on to an agency recess. Let's take a recess from the open session to convene the Community Financing Authority. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Horvath with the motion, Lowenstein with the second. And any objection to recessing to the Community Financing Authority? Thank you, Councilmember Emdy, for the nods. And we are recessed to Community Financing Authority. All right, welcome, Director Paul. F1, regular meeting of the Community Financing Authority. Do you have anything to report, Director Paul?
Actually, the agenda, we'd have to do roll call.
Oh, got it.
You have to go into the agenda.
All right. Well, Madam Clerk, can you take roll call of
Yes.
the Community Finance Authority?
Okay. Member Nierenheim is absent. Member Lowenstein.
Here.
Member Horvath.
Here.
Member MD.
Here.
Chairman Brand is absent, and Vice Chair Obaji.
Here. All right. Now, Director Paul, I think you get the reins.
No consent.
We have to go through the agenda for the,
Is there a separate agenda? Because I'm looking at
yes,
the agenda.
yes.
So I needed to have downloaded that. Give me a second.
It's in the packet.
It's in the agenda packet.
Mhm.
F1 and 2.
You just click on F1, you should be able to go right to. And then community financing agenda.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So our first item is roll call approve order of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
All right. Second by Councilmember Lowenstein.
Second, yeah.
All right. Any objections? Nope. All right. Agenda adopted as presented. And do we have any additional items for immediate consideration, Madam Clerk?
Nope, not for this item.
And is that the same as blue folder items? I take it not, since it's separate. Are there any blue
Correct.
folders?
No, not for this.
And we have 4 items on our consent calendar. Is there anybody who wishes to pull any of the consent items? Let's start with Councilmember Lowenstein. Wish to pull consent?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Horvath? Councilmember MD?
No.
All right. And I have no desire to pull anything on the consent calendar.
Motion to approve consent.
All
Okay,
right.
and just for the record, there are no
Public comments?
comments for this item.
All right.
Second.
All right. We got a motion by Councilmember Horvath to approve the consent item, second by Councilmember MD. And let's take a roll call vote. Councilmember Horvath?
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein?
Aye.
Councilmember MD?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Sorry that Councilmember Lowenstein, that I keep going out of order. And
No harm, no foul.
okay. All right, thank you. And do we have any public participation on non-agenda items for the Housing Authority?
This is for communities financing.
Yeah, sorry, Finance Authority. Yeah.
That's okay. I have none.
All right. Thank you. And do we have any ex parte communications? Well, I guess we don't
No,
have-
you just have to go to
Motion to adjourn.
J or adjourn.
Second.
All right. Motion by Councilmember Horvath, second by Councilmember MD, and any objection to adjourning? Nope. All right. We are adjourned from the Community Finance Authority. Great presentation, Director Paul. All right. Moving on.
Okay, so I'll need to do a roll call for the council meeting. So Councilmember Nierenheim is absent. Councilmember Lowenstein?
Here.
Councilmember Horvath?
Here.
Councilmember MD?
Here.
Mayor Brand absent, and Mayor Pro Tem Obaji.
Here. All right. And let's go to, I believe we go to our consent calendar.
Blue folder item?
Folder items. Here we go.
Yes. So I have,
Folder items. Madam Clerk?
yes. So for H5, which is excused absence, Commissioner Lamb needs to be removed from the list. She will not be, she'll be attending the meeting for planning. And then J1, we have public communications. And then N1, which is the Planning Commission recommendations of amendments to the Redondo Beach Municipal Code. We have the PowerPoint presentation. And that's it, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right. Thank you. And moving on to the, is there a motion to adopt? Yes.
Motion to receive and file blue folder.
Receive and file the blue folder items. All right. Second, I'll second that. Councilmember Horvath with the motion, Obaji with the second. And any objection to receiving and filing? Hearing none, they are received and filed. All right, moving on to our consent calendar. Is there anybody who want, Councilmember Horvath, do you wish to pull, or Councilmember Lowenstein, do you wish to pull anything from our consent calendar?
H3, please.
All right, H3. Councilmember Horvath, do you wish to pull anything from our consent calendar?
I do not.
All right, Councilmember MD, do you wish to pull anything from the consent calendar?
No, I was just going to mention on H3 that it's great that the artwork's going forward, but I see Mr. Lowenstein's pulled it.
All right, and I will pull out of favoring it H9. All right, for those items other than H3 and H9, is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion by Councilmember Horvath, second by Councilmember Lowenstein.
And, let's see if we have anybody.
Participation.
Right. Okay, this one's for J. I'm not sure. Okay, there's one for H9. So let me just double check if Julia Sherwood wants to speak on the consent items. Hello?
Hello. Yes, this is Juliana Sherwood.
Is this related to the items for consent, or is this a non-agenda item?
Well, we're unclear because we don't have a copy of the agenda, so we're not sure what's all included. But we just want to make sure that we are heard today on the matter of the police patrolling Veterans Park and the pier, the letter that was sent to all of you earlier today.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind waiting until public participation on non-agenda items.
Absolutely. We just don't have an agenda in front of us, so I don't know if that's on it or not on it.
It'll be on after H, after we do consent stuff, it'll be item J.
Oh, that's lovely. I believe we have a handful of parents that are online with us today. Just to give, we all have young children, just to give us a sense of timing, approximately how long will that be?
Maybe maximum 20 minutes.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Next person is Abby Burton.
She's speaking on H9, which we pulled.
Right. Oh, that's right. Okay, so sorry about that. So we'll
hang on there, Miss Burton, and we'll be with you in a second. All right. As to, is there any other public requests to speak on consent calendar items?
Nope.
All right. Any e-comments?
Nope. No e-comments also.
All right. Other than H3 and H9, is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar? We did that already. All right. So let's take a roll call vote. I should take notes. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Yes?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Obaji. Aye. All right. The consent calendar other than H3 and H9 is adopted.
Okay, so I need to read H10. Adopt by title only ordinance number 3228-22 in of the City Council of the City of Redondo Beach, California, amending Title 3, Chapter 6 of the Redondo Beach Municipal Code to establish a fee to use public electric vehicle charging stations, permit the establishment of overstay charges for public electric vehicle charging stations, and prohibit non-charging vehicles from parking at public electric vehicle charging stations for second reading and adoption. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, moving on to H3. Councilmember Lowenstein, you pulled this item.
Yeah, thank you. I commend the Public Arts Commission on commissioning these. It's great. I think it's awesome. I understand, though, that this has taken quite a while to get in front of the council. And I think something like $2,000 total was budgeted, of which $400 is spent already on this now. I'm wondering if we could have a blanket license agreement template. So rather than going back to the legal department, who has a lot more fish to fry than this, if we could do that for going forward so that this doesn't have to keep going for legal review, and that somebody who is on staff overseeing the Public Arts Commission could perhaps approve these and then bring it to the council. It's well under the threshold of what we normally spend anyway, but still, I was just hoping if we could do that. I think that'd be very helpful. And then it could be on consent calendar going forward, but to go back and forth between the commission and legal review is kind of onerous and not really worthwhile, I think. So Is that possible, Mr. Wozanski?
Yeah, we could look at ways to try to streamline the process, see if there's, I imagine now that we've had some success getting these done, we should have some templates that we can draw on to make things easier in the future. We like the commission being involved in the approval of the artwork. We certainly want that to continue. That's important. But we'll do what we can to work with the attorney's office and see if we can create a more routinized process that allows us to expedite this type of work. I suspect we can, now that we've got these through, we should be a little bit more expedient in the future, I would hope.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And barring any other public comment, I make a motion to approve H3.
Second.
All right. Councilmember Horvath, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to echo Todd's comments. I think he's hit it right on the mark here. Legal is always busy with so many other things. And I think simplifying this process, because what I'm told is that there are tons of artists and potential artworks that are ready to be put on the boxes, and really what is being held up is, on the back end here. So I would love to see it streamlined as well.
All right. Thank you. And Ms. Martins.
Hi, briefly, I just wanted to let you guys know that we do have a template agreement. That's what you're seeing in all of the various agreements that are on the H3 agenda right now. And so essentially what happens is the artwork and the artists need to be approved by the commission, and then all that information comes to our office, and we're able to get the contracts out quickly because we use the same template for all of the different artists. We just make sure that the names of the artists, art, and the amounts of compensation are changed. That's why you're seeing a large number of agreements on this agenda. But of course, we're more than happy to work with Mr. Wozanski to see if we can further streamline the process.
Thank you. And Ms. Lowenstein.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, Jillian, but I'm not sure why it has to go to you guys to make sure that the artist matches up with the work. I mean, if there's any delay, I don't get me wrong. I appreciate all you guys have done to create this. But if this delays the rollout of this, I don't see the point of doing that. Couldn't that be the city manager's office that does that rather than you guys?
We have to approve all contracts as to form, and this is a contract. So.
Okay. Well, I just don't want to give you guys any more work than you really need to do. And I'm sure you don't want to do that any more than anybody else, right?
Right, but we have to do that. You can control in other ways, such as referrals to staff or reconsidering things for a second or third time. But unfortunately, we have to. But as Jillian mentioned, it's fairly streamlined now.
Oh, okay.
It should be going forward, but we'll take a look at that.
Okay, thank you. I hope you took no offense to that. I just want to make sure it's going on.
Absolutely not, but we have to review it.
Okay, thanks.
City Attorney, as long as I have you here, if I missed an announcement that I'd like to tack on now, can I do that, or would that be either unlawful or improper? Cameron Harding reminded me.
If the council, I would finish this item and then ask the council to reopen announcements. I wouldn't do it in the middle of, I'd finish it at 9.
Right. All right, thank you. All right, so is there a motion? There was a motion to approve this in a second. So let's go ahead and do a roll call vote if there are no further comments. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Councilmember Obaji. Aye. All right.
Okay, and just for the record, there were no public participations that wanted to speak on this. Or thank you.
I'd ask council if there's any objection to my making an announcement about a music program that Community Services just put forward. No objection. All right, thank you. So we open that item. I am very proud. Sorry, Cameron, I should have said this at the onset, but I'm thankful to our new director, Cameron Harding, because there was a person teaching in the park and, throughout COVID outside teaching music to kids. And then one day he got booted. And I asked Cameron Harding, hey, is there any way we can get him back to teach kids in the park music? Because it's really cognitively beneficial to them and a real great service. And he said, yes, there's some things that we got to go through. And eventually we got to this point. So I just want the residents to see that for kids 8 to 14 and 15 plus, there are now guitar classes offered by the city of Redondo Beach. For kids starting at newborn to 5, there are music classes in the park outdoors. There are different piano classes from ages 3 to 5, and there are all sorts of cool guitar, piano, violin classes even that the city of Redondo Beach is now offering in our parks and potentially elsewhere. So I'm very proud of that. I thank you, Cameron Harding, for doing that. And it'd be awesome if we get this information out to make sure that folks know about it. Thank you. All right, moving on to back to our agenda items, consent calendar items that were pulled. H9. I pulled H9 because if a tree falls in the forest, but nobody hears it, does it really fall? Does it fall at all? And this concerns, I think, our assistant public works director, Mike Klein, who has been a real hero here in District 4 on multiple fronts. So I think there's somebody who'd like to speak, a resident who'd like to speak on that subject. If we could unmute Miss Burton to speak, I would appreciate that. Go ahead.
Okay. There you go. Abby Burton.
She's muted still.
Unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was going to introduce myself and my dogs, but now I realize there's no video. So I'll just say my name is Abby Burton. I have a dog named Rocky and a little dog named Chewy. They're both adorable. Hopefully you will get to meet them one day at our wonderful little dog park that Mike was so instrumental in putting forth. So I was asked to say a few words about Mike, and I've only known him a short time, but in those few months, he has been nothing but professional, responsive, and has shown a great amount of care for the residents of District 4, at least as far as the little dog run at Andrews Park is concerned. The first time I met Mike was last summer. I just happened to be walking my dogs in the park while he was measuring the area for fencing, and we got to talking. I couldn't believe that the Deputy Director of Public Works himself was personally taking care of it and had not assigned it to someone else. I then saw him remeasuring a few times over the summer and marking off the area so the crew would know where to put the fences. Within a few short weeks of our last encounter, he had ordered the fencing, and by Thanksgiving, it was beginning to be installed. It would have been completed sooner than its opening shortly before Christmas, but supply chain issues delayed the actual installation of the gates for the fenced area. Once the dog park was operational, I and many of the other regular users of the park noticed there were a few tweaks that could be made to make it even better. For example, ground cover instead of the dirt, more lighting, and better bench placement. Mike took the time to answer everybody's emails, phone calls, and texts. What public official even gives out his personal number? And within days, he had set up a meeting between himself, Councilman Obagi, and a few of us dog park regulars to present what our options were and get our feedback. Less than 72 hours later, which included a weekend, he had already taken care of moving the bench twice and ordering the wood chips. Just as an aside, for any of you who are interested, he and Zane are organizing a Cops and Coffee / community event to help spread the wood chips toward the end of this month. Date to be announced. So, way to go, Mike, and kudos on your promotion. We are all very grateful here in District 4 to have you on our side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Indeed, that is absolutely true. And just to give you guys a little picture to go with the words, This is the dog run, the beautiful dog run. And the bench was initially put here, which, and Mike's a dog owner, and frankly, I didn't see any issue with it. But then they made us aware that the dogs could jump on it and jump over, and it was in the sun. So he got it moved promptly over here, and then moved it again with the cinder block underneath, further into the shade. And so, Mike, the reason why I wanted to make a kind of big deal about this is because this is the customer service that we can top-notch customer service that we can deliver in Redondo Beach to our residents, where they can tell that we care, that our city cares, and our city is here to serve the residents. So thank you, Mike. You're awesome, and I think you're kind of an inspirational model for everybody in our staff. So thank you. Congratulations. All right. So I'll make a motion to approve H9. Can't forget about that. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. And roll call vote. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
I guess I should ask, is there any other public comment, Madam Clerk?
I don't have any other
All right.
comments.
Councilmember Lowenstein's aye. Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Emby.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you.
Okay, I need to read the resolution. Adopt by title only, resolution number CC-2203-011, a resolution, City Council, City of Redondo Beach, California, updating the pay and benefits plan for management and confidential employees. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, moving on to, we got that. J, public participation on non-agenda items. So those who wanted to speak about the safety issues, time to raise your hand. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items?
Let's see. So if you can raise your hand. If you're on a phone, you can do *9 and that will raise your hand. So anybody that would like to speak on the J item.
See complaints now.
Okay. So Candace Nafisi.
Good evening, Council. This is Candace Nafisi, and I'm a resident of District 3. I'm speaking to you today to kindly ask for additional police presence within our public parks. I have previously brought this to your attention a few weeks ago regarding Dominguez Parks, but I really would love to see more of a presence of the RB patrol cops within our parks, specifically after school. The bathrooms remain unsafe as there are transients and questionable behavior occurring. And since we live in a densely populated area, I really value the parks after school that we use. Please consider adding additional police presence within our parks from around 3 to 6 p.m. when the parks are largely used by students and a lot of children. I also wanted to urge the council to begin doing the groundwork in developing a business improvement program for Artesia Boulevard. Artesia Boulevard is a diamond in the rough, and I hope all of you see that too. But nothing can happen without your support and your efforts to see it through. For years, Artesia has been left out of intentional planning and investing. I do want to give a huge shout out to Councilmember Obaji for the endless improvements and the removal of the blight on Artesia Boulevard. Keep it up. We're all noticing and excited to see more. Thanks so much.
All right, as everybody knows, and it's worth reminding new participants, we are not able to respond to comments made during public participation on non-agenda items. So if you don't get a response, it's not for any other reason besides that we can't.
Okay, then I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, Sue Shin.
Hi, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ram Shinoy, and I wanted to second the observation that was brought up by earlier about the having additional police patrols around our parks where we are with our younger kids. And there was a specific incident that me and my family were involved in where we had certain members, I don't know if they were from Redondo or not, who were in Veterans Park, in the kids' play area, smoking weed. They had a snake with them, which was apparently their pet. And they were not only were they super high, but they assaulted me, they assaulted my wife, who was holding on to our one-year-old daughter. And it just felt like there was no support out there. And by the time we called the cops and the cops came in, this group of people had already disappeared. And obviously we take our kids there almost every day. So we don't really know what kind of retaliation are we expecting if we do stand up to some of these events. So I do want to urge having some more patrolling out there, especially during the busy hours when you have a lot of people visiting, especially on the weekends. We know we have a lot of visitors who come from outside Redondo Beach, and so how do we make sure that we feel safe out there with our young kids?
All right, thank you for that. And next speaker, please.
Juliana Sherwood.
Hello, council members. This is Juliana Sherwood. I believe all of you have received a letter that about 27 of us local residents wrote and sent in to you today. This was also sent to our city manager and the mayor. We would like to officially welcome our new police chief. We are so excited to have him and hope that he will continue the great work that the police department has done for us. That being said, we collectively, as Redondo Beach residents, are, and it sounds like this is the third time today that this has been brought up, we are afraid. I don't know if anybody's using that word directly, so I am going to. We are afraid. We are afraid in our parks. We are afraid in our pier. And it is time that we as residents and as a community come together and stand up for change. So in the document that we submitted to you, we articulated a proposed solution where, as Ram just mentioned a minute ago, very specifically during the weekends, and we don't need this all the time, we understand budget constraints, but in particular during the busiest times when the most families are impacted, that we feel it is very important to have a physical police presence. A uniformed officer, not that just comes by every now and again on patrol. It's not cutting it. That's why we're having these issues in the first place. We need them stationed at these parks because what will happen as a derivative of that is that people, as Ram just mentioned, with a snake that are high on meth, they're going to turn around and leave. They're not even going to come in if they see that police presence. So it, by definition, it's going to cut down on the issues that we are seeing. But more than that, it'll have a compounding effect where when we clean up our parks and our beaches and our piers, more residents are going to want to come. And that's the kind of business we need our local business to support our local entrepreneurs. But the reality is none of us want to go. We don't want to go to our pier. And that is a fundamental problem, right? So I know there's been a lot of talk over the years about cleaning up the pier and how do we get new businesses in there. But we need to start by creating a safe environment so that families with children want to go. And we would like to propose the following, that we have patrol at Veterans Park, the Redondo Pier between what used to be Barney's Beanery all the way out to the end to the fish and tackle bait location. And then on the International Boardwalk from Naja's all the way around the corner to the Fun Fish Factory.
Motion to extend.
Second that. Go ahead and take another minute, please.
Oh, thank you. We believe that the cost will be less than $100,000 and that cost is well worth the security and investment that it will make back into our community and the overall well-being of our citizens.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Sherwood.
Okay, next person is Holly Osborne.
Okay, this is Holly Osborne of District 5. Today I have remarks as well as questions, and I realize you will not answer the questions, but that doesn't mean I can't ask them. So I'm speaking today because I was very disturbed by this last week's Easy Reader, in particular the legal notices. the Easy Reader had published a photocopy of signature sheets of a petition. As you know, I just collected with the team in North Redondo several hundred signatures on the zoning initiative. Part of the instructions we were given was that signatures were not to be used in any way for any purpose other than gathering them and turning them in. The absolute last thing I would have thought of doing was photographing them and displaying them in the Easy Reader. For us, it would have been illegal. So I will leave it to the city attorney to determine if what was done regarding these recall signatures is also illegal. I don't know. I'm also disturbed as what is triggering all this recall business and who is gathering the signatures. Is if it has anything to do with cannabis, and if paid signature gatherers are being used. The newspapers, such as the Easy Reader, have been full of letters to the editors about inaccurate statements made by the cannabis interested in getting people to sign in Manhattan Beach. The cannabis interests are too financially lucrative to trust them to interfere with local politics with our best interests in mind. Straight out, I want to know whether the drug industry had anything to do with this recall effort. The city planning department is involved in producing a housing element. I have stayed out of it in terms of stating my opinion because it, to me, is largely a matter of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Most efforts are doomed to fail, and the whole process was designed to fail. I attended the SCAG housing element via Zoom exactly a week ago, February 22nd. Of 197 elements in the SCAG region, only 6 have been certified by the required date. At this point, the planning department has explained to you the rules keep changing and the goalposts keep moving. It is designed to fail. I sent the SCAG people a very polite, carefully worded statement that it was my opinion that if a professor had a class of 190 plus students and all failed except 6, the professor or the system might be at fault. They haven't replied. This has all come to public light because the city of Los Angeles itself is also failing, and this made the LA Times on Thursday's newspaper. One of the reasons we're all doomed to fail is the overall allocation is too high. The statewide HCD allocation for Reno was 2.5 million, and that number was presented to planning groups statewide, and SCAG got 1.34 million, and that's too high. And a group of legislators, including Al Maratucci, thank you, Al, have appealed for an audit, and that audit is supposed to be decided in March. That's this month. I've got a graph. I'm going to send you my graphs. And I also took statistics on the 6 groups that passed, and it's no surprise they're all much less dense than Redondo. And I'm going to send you my stuff. And
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. All right. Any other public comments, Madam Clerk?
So anybody that still would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand that hasn't spoken. Okay, at this time we have 2 e-comments. Go ahead, Vicki.
Okay, the first comment is submitted by Wayne Craig. Proponents who signed the intent to circulate a recall petition in Redondo Beach District 4 are already having remorse. These same people are now getting mad when asked why they are supporting a drug dealer. To those proponents now afraid to speak out, you should be asking yourselves the following. 1, when you signed the petition, did you know a drug dealer was bankrolling it? 2, did the drug people begging for signatures say it would be printed in the newspaper? Here are the facts for residents considering signing the recall petition. 1, drug money from marijuana sales is being used to finance the recall. 2, the drug dealer will spend upwards of $40,000 to remove an elected council member from office using paid signature gatherers just to replace them with one the drug dealer favors. 3, outside special interests will be purchasing a new council member using drug money. 4, after being bought and paid for with drug money, who will they answer to? 5, the special recall election could cost an estimated $60,000 to Redondo. 6, retail cannabis in Redondo is a separate issue. No reason to overturn a recent election by outsiders duping residents. Seems a big waste of money when duly elected Councilmember Obagi in just the past 10 months has directed upwards of $2.1 million of improvements to District 4. Compare that to the non-resident oriented council member voted out of office last year. Don't be fooled, refuse to sign the drug money sponsored recall petition. Also submitted, Lisa Youngworth. I don't know why termed out Redondo Beach Councilmember Laura MD from District 5 cares about what happens in District 4 or the latest recall paid for by the cannabis people she spoke with for 2 hours. We should instead be asking what MD has done the past 6 years for her district. If you can't think of anything positive, you are not alone. Besides lobbying for a mall in the harbor the last 6 years and recently for condos at the AES plant, the biggest achievement with fellow termed out council district member Christian Horvath is tying up the city in multiple lawsuits. The financial cost of their actions to Redondo Beach from an early lease buyout to build a rejected mall, $15 million, combined with legal expenses by some estimates, is now close to $20 million. Sorry, council members MD and Horvath, anything you say or do costs the city millions and has clearly stopped any harbor revitalization for the past 5 years. It's time to let the resident-centric city council move us forward without you and your obedience to outside special interests.
We have one more, Vicki.
Okay, thank you. I just refreshed my screen and I found it. Okay. Submitted by Leslie Campeggi. Thank you, Councilmember Lowenstein, for reminding some people today of District 4. Councilmember Zaino Baji holding the council's feet over the fire to get a significant amount included in this year's budget. $2,319,775 for D4, pretty much more than any other district, and another $210,000 for the Scout House renovations in D5. And you reminded people that you know because you prepared this year's budget. You reminded people that Councilmember Obaji was merciless in holding out for what he needed, but highly effective. As someone who lived on Rockefeller for 8 years, you stated you know firsthand that Zane has done more than any D4 council member in the past 20 plus years to bring home money for your District 4. And thank you also for relating that while John Grant is a really nice guy, it was District 1 Councilmember Nils Nierenheim that secured $2 million for Artesia from the Galleria's developer, not even his district. It's always great to have reminders of what is real, especially when there is so much revisionist history permeating social media of all kinds by those wishing the truth weren't so. That concludes public comment. Under e-comment.
All right. I'll remind folks that we cannot respond to any of those comments. Moving on. Madam Clerk, do we have to do ex parte communications? Because I don't think we have a public hearing, do we?
Yeah, no, we don't.
All right. Continue items from previous agenda. I think we'll see the Chief of Police, Joe Hoffman, about discussion and possible action on crime and vehicle collision statistics and trends for calendar year 2021.
Well, good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm honored to be here. I'm pleased to present to you some data on the 2021 crime and vehicle collision statistics. I'd like to share my screen if I could. Let's see here. Okay. I want to start off with some of the crime rates. So there was a significant decrease in the crime rates beginning in 2016 through 2019, where the city experienced about a 24% decrease in the overall crime rates. In 2020, obviously COVID happened and we saw a slight uptick, but only at 4%. And then that was followed by a very sharp rise in the crime rate of 17% in 2021, which is 21% in 2 years, which kind of offsets the 24% decrease that we had from the 3 years in 2016 to 2019. This is a nationwide issue. The crime rate is causing significant concern in communities all across the country, and Redondo Beach is no exception to that. I've highlighted some of these specific areas where we've seen the most significant uptick in our crime rates. One is under what's called larceny under the Part 1 crime rate, or theft, and that's gone up 17% in 2021. And a lot of that can be attributed to the theft in catalytic converters, which a lot of people have heard about and seen some exposure to, and also the rise in the commercial burglaries or the grab and runs. People have seen media stories about these crews that are going into commercial businesses, rushing in and stealing a large volume of merchandise. So we had 153 more incidents in 2021 than in 2020, which is significant for us, as we went from 915 to 1,068. And one of the more concerning categories is the aggravated assaults. So that's basically an unlawful attack by one person on another that results in an injury. We had a 6-year average of 97 aggravated assaults that were occurring. And in 2021, that number has gone up to 168. And it's very troubling based on the numbers that we're seeing. And again, this is something that's occurring in communities all across the country, especially throughout Los Angeles County. But one of the more troubling statistics within that aggravated assault category is the assaults on police officers that we're seeing. So that is typically hovered around the number 30 per year in assaults on police officers. In 2020, we had 52, and in 2021, we had 53. And that's just in Redondo Beach. And you can see when looking at some of the data that we had, there was definitely an uptick during the times of civil unrest. However, those are troubling numbers, and it's concerning for maintaining the staffing levels and recruiting and dealing with everything that we have to as far as these rising crime rates. Moving on to the vehicle collision stats. So the vehicle collisions have been relatively consistent over the past 5 years. We had 631 traffic collision reports in 2021, and that ranges from a low of 536 in 2020. Less people were on the road, more people were working from home, there was less traffic out there, back to our highest number, which was 678 back in 2016. So the number of overall traffic collisions has been relatively consistent. What I do want to draw your attention to, though, is the significant increase in hit and run collisions, both injury and non-injury, or misdemeanor and felony. So we had 255 non-injury hit and run collisions and 35 felony or injury hit and run collisions, which totals 290 hit and run collisions in 2021, which is up from 225 the previous year. And that's a significant increase. And it's also indicative of some of the lack of consequences and difficulty that we've experienced with filing various types of crimes. And we're seeing these types of crimes rise as well, in addition to the larceny and some of the other. We did have a slight increase in vehicle versus bicyclist collisions. It shows a 43% increase, and that's due to 9 collisions. Over the years, it's averaged between 20 and 30. And in 2020, we had 21 collisions, and in 2021, it went up 30. But that is something that we're paying attention to. One of the issues that we've been seeing trending is the e-bikes and some of the collisions related to those. And we're trying to get some training and think of ways that we can strategize to work on e-bikes as well to bring down some of those collisions. These are just some different charts that I thought that you might find interesting, as I did, as we were researching the data related to crime rates. So with the chart on the left, gun incidents 2020 and 2021, that is the number of police-related calls that the Redondo Beach Police Department has responded to involving firearms. So you'll see in 2020, there was 26 calls. And in 2021, that number is 140. And I actually pulled the number of seizures of firearms, and it was significant. And that is a startling number, quite frankly. And one of the concerns is the amount of ghost guns. You may have seen that term floated around in the media, where they're unserialized weapons that are easily manufactured. And I'm constantly shocked by the amount of these types of firearms that our officers are routinely recovering in traffic stops and on calls for service. The uptick there is absolutely incredible. And if you look at the stats for 2022, you can see we had 18 just in January. And then you got to realize that this report was prepared for a previous council meeting. So the number of 3 in February, that's likely gone up since we pulled this data. But it seems like that trend is continuing with the firearm incidents in the city. I do want to make sure that I emphasize our enforcement efforts, though. So the citation statistics for 2020 and 2021 are listed here. And in 2020, we issued just over 2,800 traffic citations. And in 2021, that number went up to over 3,500. So our traffic unit, our patrol officers are out there enforcing traffic violations, both moving violations, equipment violations, bicycle violations. There was a significant increase in those in 2021. And our enforcement is up, and we are continuing to pay a particular attention to the areas of concern that are coming in on the traffic hotline and trying to provide extra patrol and traffic resources as needed based upon the resources that we have available to address the concerns. With the uptick in crime and the traffic information that I shared with you briefly, we, as a police department, have talked about some of the planned responses that we have for 2022. We have a special investigations unit that's housed within our investigations division and does not typically handle the follow-up on routine arrests. And we can use this unit to focus on what issues are plaguing the city and adjust it accordingly. The intent is to use this unit to focus on the local issues, such as the catalytic converter thefts and the commercial burglaries. We've done a series of details and used advanced technology that we have available to identify some of these commercial burglary crews and make arrests or work with other cities when we're aware that they're committing crimes in other cities. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that are arrested are released relatively quickly, and we're seeing the same offenders arrested multiple times. The catalytic converters is a continuing problem that is plaguing the entire county of Los Angeles. And we are working to try to identify a way to present a ordinance that would allow for additional enforcement options for our officers in the field, just by merely encountering individuals in the city limits that may have catalytic converter parts or the tools to remove catalytic converters that could be here to commit crime. Our objective would be to proactively take that enforcement action and prevent the crimes from even occurring. We've heard tonight about the increase in the desire to increase the police presence in the harbor area, and that is in the pier and Veterans Park. And that is, we hear you, we understand that, and it is absolutely a concern. One of the solutions that we have, we only have so many resources available. The city's broken up into essentially 5 patrol areas in the Galleria. We make the decisions on how to deploy our resources based upon the calls for service and our ability to respond efficiently. We do have the pier substation available on the pier. However, we have not had the staffing to have that staffed even 7 days a week. With the numbers that we have right now, we are experiencing a little bit of a dip in staffing. We do have some personnel in the academy and about to attend the academy, but recruiting is a constant challenge, as well as dealing with injuries and light duty and other issues. So what we're working on right now is a plan that would be able to be unrolled in April, which would rehouse some of our units, traffic unit, community services unit, into the pier area. So that would be where they're working from. And what's that going to do is going to provide an immediate increase in the presence of police officers, police vehicles, foot patrols, and interaction with the merchants and those that are visiting the pier. And it's an option that we can implement almost immediately at zero cost. Right now, money isn't the issue as far as getting the personnel down there, it's having the personnel. So I'm trying to look at ways to be creative using the resources that we have immediately available to increase the presence. And we're developing that plan right now, and it's going to be put into place and allow for an immediate option where the presence is increased and it's going to be seen by the residents and the businesses. We are also looking at the expanded use of technology and the cameras that we have available. City Council recently approved our Fusus camera system, which allows us to work with businesses in the city to gain access to certain types of security footage, which will not only provide a valuable investigative tool after the fact, but actually be live streamed to provide proactive information when officers are actually responding on calls for service, and hopefully increase safety in the community and provide additional information to the responding officers. That's a program that we're actively working on, reaching out to various businesses to explain the program, and hope to expand that system in 2022. We're going to work on traffic details. At the mid-year budget, there was a decision package that was approved that authorized additional funding specifically for traffic details. And we are able to identify specific concerns with bicyclists and turning violations and speed violations. where we can, loud exhaust, I know has been a pressing one over the course of the past couple of years. And this is an opportunity where we can put specific details together to target the issues that are causing the most complaints related to traffic. We have grant funding through the Office of Traffic Safety for pedestrian and bicycle enforcement that we are just about to start scheduling personnel for. And we are going to be able to focus on the areas. We get a lot of bicycle complaints along the Esplanade and the bike path on North Harbor Drive. And it'll be an opportunity for the officers to be out there conducting enforcement. And when it's on a grant basis, that's their primary assignment. The grant officers are in addition to the officers that are handling the calls for service, and their primary duty is to look for these violations and take appropriate enforcement action, and they're not getting pulled away on report calls and other types of calls for service. So having these grants and constantly pursuing these grants is a huge value to the police department and the community, and allows us to really address some of these traffic issues that are top concerns. Community outreach on the traffic issues is also very important. I see an increase in compliance when we put out signboards and we have the radar devices that indicate how fast people are going. And I think that there is an opportunity there for us to use our robust social media programs in the police department and capitalize on the technology that we have available to engage in community outreach, to explain how important it is for us to have a robust traffic safety program. And then the specialized training for specific problem areas. This is one of those issues where we identify problems, and sometimes the enforcement isn't just as easy as going out and writing a ticket. One of the specific examples there is with the street racing and the loud exhaust issues. So we actually last week hosted a class at the police annex building that was taught by the California Highway Patrol and the Bureau of Automotive Repair. They came and taught a class on street racing, ways that we can conduct inspections on vehicles, taking vehicles to referees to make sure that the vehicles are in compliance. And it has added a whole new set of tools to the enforcement toolbox for addressing these types of issues. A lot of times, a loud exhaust type citations are fix-it tickets for modified exhaust, and it's just a temporary band-aid that doesn't affect the problem. So by pursuing this type of specific training that we sent 3 of our traffic officers to, hopefully we're going to be able to use some of the funding that was acquired through the mid-year budget and conduct specific details during the times that we believe that these violations are occurring, and actually take enforcement action that's going to have an impact. So there's a lot going on. We understand that there's been an uptick in crime, and we're working on a plan to most efficiently use our resources to address each issue individually. And then as well as the traffic is one of the top concerns. We see it all the time in some of our public polling software reports. And we are diligently looking at the best way to address it based on the funding and the resources available. That's a very brief overview of everything I have, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Chief. First, I appreciate the service of the men and women in uniform here in the RBPD, and I also appreciate how you guys adapt to what is presenting itself in the community. One thing I noticed on a 60 Minutes episode from Austin covering their police department is that they are moving towards hiring non-police personnel for those functions that don't require police. So when they're responding to homelessness disturbance, they're sending a psychologist or a crisis manager rather than a police officer along with the homeless navigator. Potentially down at the pier. Granted, I mean, we had a shooting incident not too long ago, but maybe one fix is getting unarmed security guards to help at least have a presence there of authority. While we'd love to have a police officer down there all the time, but it would allow by getting non-police personnel into some of these functions, it would free up police resources for those that they're essential to in terms of crime fighting and the like. Have you all given that much thought? Is there any effort to kind of move in that direction?
Well, as far as the security guards, it would present an issue with our ability to provide direction. And I think probably the better model would be to use the available resources that we have and relocate them so that they're providing an immediate presence and they already have the knowledge and the training to properly respond to these incidents. Because just being able to respond on an incident isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. It could actually make it worse. The amount of training that we provide to our personnel on dealing with mental illness and proper officer safety tactics and these resources available is essential to handling these problems in the most humane way possible. So I think that by identifying a location where we can house existing resources, provide that immediate presence, and provide additional responsibilities to conduct those foot patrols, and maybe incorporate some of the non-police officer positions that we currently have in the city, such as our MSOs or our parking enforcement. I would like to increase the number of community services officers that we had. When I worked down at the pier back in the 90s, we had community services officers down there. They worked closely with the police officers, but they were also able to conduct limited enforcement, bicycle violations and fishing violations and such. And it's a really good model because it's under the direction and control of the police department and our policy manual, which allows us to make sure that every encounter with the citizens holds true to the standards that we maintain as a police department, and we're not violating the trust that the community expects of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't suggesting hiring an outside company, but basically hiring people within the police department who don't go through, let's say, the whole police academy and the like, but have some limited training that would allow them to respond to things that don't require a full-fledged police officer. But anyway, I think you answered my question well. Thank you. Councilmember Horvath.
Hey, Chief, I have a handful of questions, and you touched on some of these, but I want to give you, especially here on your first night, an opportunity to just go a little bit deeper if you want. Sure. The first thing, can you just explain, you touched on it a little bit, but for residents that are either in the meeting or watching, how patrols work, how many units, either in patrols and motors, we have out at any given time, just so they have an understanding about where your resources are throughout the city, and then how many shifts we have, and what does that look like? Because I think sometimes people they don't know.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we're authorized for 95 police officers, and that includes supervisors, command staff, everybody, 95 sworn personnel, including me. Right now, we're at 89. We're down 6 positions. And we do have a handful of officers that are either out injured or in a light duty capacity and can't work full duty. And we have a couple officers that are pregnant and can't work full duty in the field. So it brings our number of available personnel down to 83. So what we have to do is look at all the responsibilities that we have and how we're going to deploy those resources. We've broken up the city into essentially 5 areas plus the Galleria area. And we make sure that we have a police officer in each one of those areas 24 hours a day and supervision available that can respond to any incident. We determine how many officers are going to be on duty and the overlapping of shifts and when the traffic officers are going to be working based on call volume. We track call volume throughout the year and we see when is the most activity, when are we needed the most, when are the most car accidents. During the rush hours, we need traffic officers, and that's how we decide how many people are out there. So in the evening hours, overnight, when most people are sleeping, we could have 5 or 6 officers at the most. And we have close working relationships with the other cities. And when a significant incident happens, we draw on our mutual aid resources and we all work together. During the daytime, we could have 30 or 40 officers working because we have all of the detectives that are on duty, all of the traffic officers, all of the school resource officers, all of our community services officers, all of command staff, which typically comes to work in a uniform, all of our patrol officers, and everyone has a different responsibility, but there's a lot more officers available. But with being the police department, we have such a wide range of responsibilities, from responding to calls for service and conducting community outreach and then following through on investigations and presenting cases for prosecution and everything that goes along with that. It still stretches our resources incredibly thin. And we have to deploy those resources based on where we can provide the greatest level of safety due to the call volume and activity that we're experiencing. hopefully that provides a little bit of an overview.
No, yeah, I just, this, not for me so much as it is for the people
Sure.
out there. And I think, as long as I've been here, right, this is a constant issue that your department has. You have people that are either out on injury, or people out on medical, or you have people retiring. And so there's constant flux.
Yes.
And it makes your job that much more challenging to have it feel consistent, if you will, on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Okay, so you presented all the stats, and this is really going to be more of an anecdotal answer from your perspective. But in your 28 years, you've seen trends go up and down, I'm sure multiple times. But from your perspective, what did I lose you guys?
No, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, my screen froze. What, in your mind, if you were to kind of analyze, why the trends were going down and now they're starting to go back up, like, what is it? Because it's not just happening in Redondo, it's happening everywhere. And so, what is it that you mentioned some things that we can do to pivot here, but what can we do as residents also to help aid, the PD in, see something, say something, or whatever, but any insights into like what's going on and why from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex question because there's a lot of different factors that go into it. I mean, there's the profession of law enforcement has become increasingly challenging over the years, and it has contributed to challenges with recruitment. And the harder it is for us to have police officers to hire them, the harder it is for us to fill all of these available positions within the organization. And obviously, there's been changes in legislation that have reduced criminal penalties, and there's been various laws that have limited bail and allowed people to not spend as much time incarcerated. And there has been crime rates that have resulted from that due to a lack of consequences that we've seen an uptick with. There have been challenges with filing certain cases and keeping people in custody. And it's an ongoing struggle. However, it's a moving target. And I have seen the crime trends go back and forth over the course of 28 years. And sometimes it's some of the same crimes, and sometimes it changes just based on what's happening in society. And as a law enforcement organization, we change with it, and we adjust our scheduling with it, and we adjust our staffing with it. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do is maintain that level of trust that we have with the community, because we need those phone calls. When people see things, we need that first call to be to the police department so we have an opportunity to respond and take care of it. When I see some of these letters and emails come in talking about crimes that they've witnessed or been involved in, but they weren't reported, it makes it increasingly challenging for us because we don't have an opportunity to step in and try to do the right thing and take the appropriate enforcement action. COVID was a challenge as far as we saw a real uptick in the traffic related issues. I'm not exactly sure why it was, but after 2020 and going into 2021, we saw a lot more traffic related issues and a lot more complaints coming in about traffic. And it's difficult to determine exactly why, if less people were commuting, had more free time, if what exactly the issue was, but it has been a concern that we're paying attention to and trying to adjust our resources and strategies appropriately so that we can target the specific instances, which is why we requested additional funding for specific details at mid-year, and we have grant funding coming down, and we're seeking additional training. As these opportunities present themselves, we can go out there and actually specifically focus on them. The changes are not unique. The changes in uptick in crime and traffic are not unique to just Redondo Beach. It's countywide, statewide, nationwide. And I think that the difference in Redondo Beach is that the level of support that we have from the community and from the city council is incredible and allows us the opportunity and the flexibility to adjust and get the resources that we need so that we can address these in a proactive manner.
Thank you. And then my last question, dealing with your last slide and pivoting, right? Trying to figure out how do we address some of these changes that you're seeing out there, and some of those comments that we heard during public comment on non-agenda items, right? What you know, are there ways where like school resource officers, you know, can, or some, you know, community service officers, as you mentioned, can be, you know, assigned occasionally to parks that are problematic, like Dominguez or Veterans, or, you know, what are some strategies that you would see potentially, you know, as ways to help address some of those concerns we heard earlier today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at their letter, in their proposed solution, I see much stronger physical police presence, and I agree. And I think that that's one of the things that we need to do is look at the resources that we have immediately available and figure how can we put forth a much stronger police presence. I definitely want to hire 6 more people, 6 more police officers, but that, you know, that's a 12 to 18 month process to hire police officers, have them complete the academy field training, and then have them out in the field available with all the other positions that we have that we're currently filling. So I think the best way to do it is by not just using one specific unit, not just using the SROs, not just relying on patrol to do periodic patrol checks, but using various units within the police department to take a collaborative approach on regularly checking the parks. And that's why for the pier in the harbor area, the idea that we're working through right now is to actually reassign police officers, units, supervisors, all the way up to actually having a captain with an office down on the pier that will be where they report to work. So instead of working out of the police station on Diamond or the annex building across the street, that will be where they're based out of. There'll be police cars parked out there. When they're coming and going to various calls, if they're motors and they're going to a car accident, they're going to leave and then come back there to write the reports. There's going to be a constant presence, and that's going to encourage better communication with the merchants and an opportunity for interactions with residents. And also it's going to provide an immediate crime deterrent. And there's no reason why we can't take that same approach and come up with a plan to periodically have more of a presence in the parks. And that's something that we can definitely explore using a combination of police officers from patrol, from traffic, from community services, and also the increase that we now have with our parking enforcement and animal control and our MSOs, which we recently have been able to fill the majority of those vacant positions. I hear them out there now stepping up the parking enforcement and animal control enforcement, which is another big issue. And there's no reason why they can't factor in walks through the parks as part of that process. It's a Redondo Beach employee that has been trained to conduct a certain level of enforcement, and it could be just the deterrent that we need. And I think that a collaborative approach like that, although it's not going to stop the problem immediately, it will have a positive effect.
Great. Last question. So assuming COVID trends continue to go down, you guys had been talking about doing like kind of command centers, you know, throughout town in the trailer where you would have your briefings and, you know, just being out there in the community. But I think that got put on hold with, you know, rising COVID numbers. Are you thinking about continuing that?
We absolutely are. The snow cone machine is primed and ready to go. The popcorn machine is also ready. The trailers in the annex lot, yeah, we use it. We still do take it out when we do some of the community events. You know, we've done the popcorn and snow cones along the Esplanade, but getting the large groups together has been an issue because of COVID and social distancing. We want to make sure that we maintain compliance with all the various regulations. I see that some of those are starting to ease up as we speak. And as we get our new command level personnel in place, that's going to be an opportunity for us to really hit the throttle on the community outreach that's been stalled due to COVID. And I'm very, very excited about how we're going to take what Chief Hoffman built and just keep that going and actually expand on it with some of the things that we weren't able to do in the last couple of years, and really work closely with the residents that haven't been able to interact with the police department that much, and do everything that we can to just move that trust and safety forward.
Great. And for you or Mike, are we still doing the overhire program that we started some years ago?
Yeah, yes, we are. It's just we're now at a point where we have to sort of reprime the pump. And
Got it.
I think Chief Hoffman's going to be making sergeant appointments here soon, and we'll have exactly the number that we need to hire. You know, we're short 6 in total. We'll likely hire somewhere between 10 and 15 as part of this next round, anticipating some level of attrition over the next year and a half as we move through future retirements and the like. So yeah, we have worked that program very well, and budgetarily and we have a pretty good sense of where we're at dollars wise. So we haven't had to set money aside, but we are still using an overhire mentality as we bring on new officers, because we know we're going to lose some through attrition. Joe mentioned to me today that I think we lost, was it 2 in a matter of 48 hours, before they'd even really started the academy, or 1 right before the academy, 1 right after. So the job has gotten harder, and that is starting to manifest itself in our recruitment efforts.
Great.
We hired 3 police recruits about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and one of them decided to resign before even showing up for the first day, after speaking with a recruit that we currently have in the police academy and understanding the stressful nature of that program. 2 of the 3 showed up on day 1, and one of them left prior to starting day 2, and we're down to 1. And I actually had this conversation today. It's challenging because we need to make sure that we're hiring police recruits that meet the standards that the citizens of Redondo Beach deserve. And the recruitment is a challenge. Redondo Beach is a very attractive city to work in, but it's not just our agency that's having some challenges with recruiting. And we're working very hard to make sure that we're selecting candidates that meet our standards and not just trying to fill the numbers with anybody, because the citizens deserve that.
Got it. Well, thank you for answering all those questions, and everybody else for indulging me, because it's always more complicated than just like, hey, we need more presence, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain that. Thanks.
Yes.
You did ask 2 more questions after you said your last question, but Councilor Lowenstein.
Well, thank you for being so.
Yeah. I'll keep my comments fairly short, and questions fairly short. Chief, I hope you enjoyed hearing that title.
I did, yes.
A couple things. I'm not gonna echo so much the questions about the pier and the parks, although Ms. Nafisi's statement, as well as the folks that were on about Veterans Park, kind of ring true in terms of the after hours, the 3 to 6. But the pier itself, what concerns I've heard about are concerns, especially females, but males as well, walking to and from their cars that are employees late at night, not well lit. I know we're going to work on lighting down there, but it's a concern. Some of them have been very concerned about their safety, rightfully so. We've had, people from transients to other people physically, appearing, I don't want to say assaulting, but in front of their faces, making them very uncomfortable. And I hope we can, by increased presence, not only during hours, but after hours, especially at night, and in the parking garages, take a look at that. The other thing I would suggest we look at is maybe putting cameras down there. And so you can cover more ground, and you can monitor what's going on, because it's really hard for you all to be everywhere every time. But cameras monitored at the station on the pier would be maybe something we should look at. If we need a budget response report to do these type of things, I'd encourage us to do that, so that we look at making those referrals, and then when budget time comes around, we can allocate money for that.
Sorry, Councilman, just on that point, if you wouldn't mind, we have looked at that, and we're going to be bringing a recommendation to you as part of the annual budget process to do both of those things, including perhaps some reinvestment in the substation itself. We think the parking structure in the International Boardwalk area needs sort of the old SEPTED review, crime prevention through environmental design. Lighting and cameras are kind of low-hanging fruit for us. So we intend to bring that to you. We actually did a small BRR as part of mid-year. We didn't get a chance to really talk about it, but that will be foundational to what we submit to you all as a recommendation as part of the 22-23 budget.
Okay, great. Thank you. Related to street racing and exhaust, I know that some of the other surrounding cities, for example, PV, up in PV, I guess it's RPV, and then Hermosa are being very aggressive in ticketing people for exhaust, legally modified exhaust. I want us to look at not just cars, but motorcycles. I know people, especially Harleys, people are modifying them. And, I know it requires some special training. We have decibel meters. but I'm hoping that we can put a clamp down on this because it's an issue for people, quality of life. And you know where I'm at with quality of life. It's really important for our residents. So I'm hoping that maybe you want to comment on that further.
Yeah, absolutely. The modified exhaust citations are a fix-it ticket, and they don't have much teeth, and that's what a lot of what you're seeing. So what we did, and I'm glad we were able to get that training done last week with the CHP and the Bureau of Automotive Repair, because what we're doing is we're developing in-house experts. The decibel reading process isn't as cut and dry as it may seem, issuing citations for the decibel reading. It needs to be done in a certain type of environment without any ambient noise, and it's much more complex than just pulling a car over with loud exhaust and asking them to rev the engine to get a decibel reading. It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So what we're trying to do is develop subject matter experts so that we can conduct enforcement for specific sections that are related to modified vehicles that are specifically designed for street racing, which will translate into a reduction in the exhaust issues. And with the funding that was provided through the mid-year budget specifically for traffic details, I think we're going to be entering into a season where we typically start to see an uptick in the loud exhaust, especially in the Catalina corridor and around the pier. And it's going to give us an opportunity to have specific details for designated time periods with the sole purpose of enforcing those types of violations, as opposed to asking a motorcycle officer or patrol officer, hey, can you go sit down here for an hour? And during that hour they're there, no one happens to come by. Where now we can do targeted enforcement with subject matter experts, and hopefully with a public awareness campaign and signboards and a multifaceted approach to it, we can make a significant dent in it coming into the summer months. We tend to see the most complaints.
Well, and also that reminds me, last year, the street racing coming from the pier parking garages up that hill. I know you guys spent a lot of time doing that, but it's a clear problem. I don't know how we address that, but it's something that I'd like us to look at. And I understand that it's complicated with the decibel meters, but how is it that the other cities are doing that? What are they doing? What best practices are they employing?
Well, I'm not aware of any other cities actually using a decibel meter to conduct the enforcement. From my understanding, it's mostly modified exhaust tickets, which is a fix-it ticket, as opposed to the actual noise level decibel ticket. We conducted extensive research into that and looked into the process for being able to conduct enforceable citations. A decibel ticket, South Bay Court even entertain it unless it's done in the proper manner. And in a field setting, an officer with a decibel reading meter, that is not the proper setting, and we wouldn't be able to actually adjudicate that type of a case in South Bay Court. So that's why we're looking at other means so that we could actually have some meaningful enforcement. And I'm hoping that with a combination of the specialized training that we've provided now members of our traffic unit and conducting some enforcement for modified exhaust, coupled with public awareness campaign, and as you've already mentioned, cameras, which provides multiple opportunities with the city camera system that we have, since we do have a city network at the Pier substation, and the new software program that would allow us access to cameras from businesses, coupled with license plate readers that we do have on Torrance Boulevard. I'm hoping that we can use a combination of technology and enforcement personnel to make a significant dent in it this coming summer.
Well, I'd encourage you to reach out to, Chief LeBaron or whoever it is that is doing that. And, I would appreciate that. I know it's kind of running after a rabbit. It's really tough to sometimes catch the rabbit. So, and I know that I think up on the hill, they had, the traffic display signs.
Yes.
So, I know that maybe that helps. I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think any public awareness that we can do is going to maybe cause somebody to just slow down a little bit, and it's going to reduce that noise. So I think it's a combination of efforts that's going to have the greatest impact.
Okay, great. The last thing I'd like to say is regarding speeding. District 2 specifically has a lot of problems. We have a lot of kids that are driving cars to RUHS and driving through neighborhoods faster. We have a lot of kids that walk to school, just like in every other neighborhood. And it really, really worries me that kids are driving too fast in some of these neighborhoods. And quite honestly, parents are driving too fast to get their kids to school. So, I know that, again, that's a tough thing to enforce because, it's it's catching the rabbit. Sometimes it's difficult to catch the rabbit, but whatever we can do to increase patrols in this area around the high school, the middle school, probably I would imagine around Adams is a problem. Parents driving kids to school and kids especially running, because I've heard of lots of running stop signs and speeding in this area. So whatever you can do, but I really appreciate all the effort and time you're putting into this. And thanks for the ability to speak right now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I understand that traffic issues are usually the top concern that get brought up to us, and we'll make sure that we're consistently focusing our efforts. I encourage any citizen that has a problem area to call the traffic hotline and leave us any specific details, times, and locations. We do put those out regularly to our traffic unit officers and our patrol officers. And I am seeing and hearing the enforcement activity based on the traffic hotline complaints.
Chief, what is the traffic hotline number? Because there seems to be a new number I learned about every couple months or so in the city.
I'll make sure that it's current and it's accurate and it's posted on the website. And I'll follow up on that tomorrow.
Councilmember Horvath, you still have your hand up from before, or you've been?
Oh, no, yep, you're right. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Emdy.
You mentioned in your report that you were talking about how you were going to handle the increase of e-bike incidents. So are you, and you were doing training for e-bikes. I'm a little concerned by that statement, and I'd like to get clarification. Are you guys going after e-bikes, or are you, what do you mean by that?
Well, the problem with the e-bikes is that there's different classifications of e-bikes, and certain ones are allowed in bike lanes and other ones aren't. And you can't tell what type of e-bike it is from a distance. So it's impossible for an officer from a distance to tell what type of e-bike it is. However, what is occurring with the e-bikes is they're fast. And there's definitely an increase in the bicycle with the e-bikes running stop signs and even exceeding the speed limits on some of the streets that have 25-mile-an-hour posted speed limits, which is the majority of the residential streets. So I think what the training is that we're working on and preparing the training bulletin for is providing information on the different types of e-bikes that are out there, and also the fact that all these bikes that are committing these violations are subject to all the same rules of the road. So we can stress the priority of that as being an enforcement option, because that could be contributing to the uptick that we're seeing in the bicycle versus vehicle collisions. I've seen definitely more e-bikes out there. And because of that, it's something that's a newer phenomena, and we have to pay close attention to it as a police department to make sure that we can keep our finger on it for sure.
I'm just a little concerned that we're going to go after e-bikes when e-bikes are actually quite a great solution for traffic. And to be able, if more people got on e-bikes instead of their cars, we could actually solve quite a bit. And so I'm a little wary about us just focusing on e-bikes versus an overall solution, such as, shared streets and education on bicyclists being there. Some coastal cities have their officers on e-bikes. Is that something you've heard about, or you'd even consider?
We actually have a few. We have a few e-bikes, that have mostly been donated. Our bicycle officer program is a little bit limited right now. In the past, we've used them frequently around the mall during the holiday season, and then in the harbor area during the summer months. We probably have 4 or 5 e-bikes, and it's definitely an opportunity for us to use them. And I wouldn't say that we're targeting e-bikes. That I think the concern is that there is definitely a trend, and we're seeing more e-bikes out there. And the e-bikes have much greater capabilities than just a human-powered bike. And because of that, the speeds that they go, they're definitely more capable of causing injury during a collision. And the enforcement component is such that we want to make sure that people that are riding e-bikes understand the safety challenges, the stopping distances when they're at the speed that they could rapidly accelerate to, and the fact that bicycles are subject to the same rules of the road.
Great. Good to hear it. Thank you. And also, when you did the statistics that it went up a certain percentage, these different crimes, That's wonderful, but I just kind of want to do a sanity check to people. If you compare that to the number of residents that are in Redondo, our crime is still extremely low. And these are good to watch these trends, but it's anybody watching, I want to make sure you understand it's still a very safe city. Would you agree with that?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that. The city is incredibly safe. And, there's been an uptick in crime throughout the nation, especially through LA County. If you look at a lot of other cities, the crime is almost uncontrollable. And crime is occurring, and for various reasons that we've kind of touched on. However, I want the residents to be reassured that we have a very responsive, proactive, and dedicated police department. And although these crimes occurring, our arrest rate and the rate that we're solving the crimes is also incredibly high. Doesn't make an excuse for the crime. Our goal is to have zero crime and zero complaints. And we're going to keep working until we can achieve that goal. It's going to take us some time, but we're not giving up. So with the support of the community, we're going to keep the crime rates under control, and we're going to continue to be transparent and share as much as we can about the way that we're deploying our resources to continue to build the trust and safety in Redondo Beach.
Right. So thank you for saying that, because I agree. And so just when we're going, discussing the speed of e-bikes, it's really the speed of everybody. And so that everyone needs to slow down, not just the bikes, but the cars, and to make sure that everybody's safe and can use the roads. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Chief Hoffman. Just a quick couple follow-ons. First, do you have a reservist corps, and do you need help essentially promoting people to join the reserves? Is that something that you guys would like to see?
We do have reserves, and we're constantly taking on anybody that is interested in being a reserve. Becoming a reserve is a significant commitment. There's a lot of training involved, which somebody who wants to pursue that endeavor has to really be dedicated to the process. It's a significant commitment. Our reserves typically have full-time jobs doing something else, and then have to do all the training at nights and on the weekend and go through the same training program. And it is a significant commitment. It's wonderful to have reserves. They provide a multiplier for our workforce and give us the opportunity to have more people out there in uniform, especially when we have special events, the races and the music festivals and such. And anything that we can do to continue to recruiting capable candidates for reserves is welcomed.
All right. Thank you. I got nothing else. Thank you all.
Mayor Pro Tem Abaji, while you're on that, Chief, do you want to talk about the VIP program as well for people who still want to volunteer but maybe can't give the amount of time for
Sure.
the service?
We have lots of opportunities. We do have the VIP program, which is generally consists of a retired workforce that we bring on and provide a level of training and help us with a lot of duties that don't require a police officer or even one of our municipal services officers, such as subpoena service to witnesses or vacation checks, which is one of those opportunities for residents to see a car that's marked with Redondo Beach Police driving through their neighborhood and maybe walking up and checking on their neighbor's house. And even though it's not a police officer, it's still a representative of the police department that's providing a positive service and having those types of positive contacts. And we also have the Citizens Police Academy, which is an opportunity for residents of the city to dedicate their time to come in weekly and learn about all the different functions of the police department. And then at the conclusion of the police academy, we use the Citizens Police Academy graduates to assist in events as well, and to put on a traffic vest and help us at intersections that don't have a lot of traffic flow. We had a bunch work in the Super Bowl 10K, and it's another opportunity for anybody that wants to get involved to be involved. We try to have as many opportunities as possible for residents that want to contribute, so that despite their level of time that they have, that we're going to find an opportunity for that to happen.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk, do we have any public participation?
Yes, we have Brianna Egan.
Hello. Hi, City Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Sorry if I missed an earlier public comment. I jumped in a little bit late. But I think with this presentation, I wanted to kind of focus a little more on the vehicle collision statistics and kind of provide this perspective that it's not always going to be about like enforcement and education, which are important, but a huge component of traffic violence is because of street design. And so like we've seen like cars and trucks seem to just be getting larger and heavier, and pedestrian deaths are growing. And so road design is really important to be able to bring down the fatal collisions and injuries for drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclists. So the data that was presented here, we see that in 2021, there was an increase in these types of fatal collisions and injuries, as well as DUIs and hit and runs. And then there's also was a 40% or more increase in the vehicle versus bicyclist collision and the bicyclist injuries. And so just kind of to think about how our standard street specifications, they really prioritize motorists and movement of cars at the expense of other street users, such as like arterials that really are designed for cars to move at high speeds. And so I think we need to think about like changing the street design and updating street design to reduce these high speeds. And so that would be through things like complete streets initiatives, traffic calming, bulb outs for crosswalks, which I know are starting to be implemented more, and even like car-free street pilots. There could be strategic streets around the city that could be closed to cars and open more only to like bicyclists and pedestrians, as well as inexpensive protected bike lane build outs. So this could be done with things like planters and boulders, for example. So yeah, I encourage City Council to even request additional data beyond these charts. Maybe we should think about what are the demographics of the drivers and pedestrians and cyclists involved, like their age and gender, and then even the location of these collisions on a map. So you could identify a lot of the hotspots and think about which ones would have the most impact from making immediate improvements. Yeah, so that's just a perspective I wanted to add, and think about, you know, the most vulnerable people in our community, like children and the elderly, who are disproportionately killed on the streets. So we shouldn't accept traffic deaths as normal, and we should make every effort to change roads and street designs to better accommodate all road users and reduce these tragedies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Egan.
Okay, our next person is Candace Nafisi.
Good evening. My name is Candace Nafisi. I'm a resident in District 3. First and foremost, congratulations to Chief Hoffman on your new role in the city of Redondo Beach. We are excited to have you in this new role and look forward to it. The department's efforts are always noticed, and with that said, residents are keenly aware when they don't see your officers. I understand RBPD's limitations and budget constraints and the difficulty in finding strong candidates to serve. But as you shared earlier, maybe there's an opportunity to pivot towards the community needs. It does appear that there is an additional need for presence in our parks. So some ways that I was brainstorming and thinking about things that you could think about is, could we recruit and leverage the reserve officers or the VIP program? Could we encourage your community relations team to do more events in the parks? So it's sort of like a 2-for-1 deal. There's an event at the park with police presence. Could you work with City Council to request additional sign-on bonuses? And if you already offer one, perhaps consider increasing it. And then the fourth thing I was thinking about is offering strong lateral bonuses so that officers that are already trained are ready to work and can just immediately begin in our city. I have full confidence that you know what's best for your department, so I share the above to encourage out-of-the-box thinking. But I hope that our department can continue to be nimble during this unique time. We thank you for all of the work that you and your department have done for our city to keep me and my family and our neighbors safe. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Nafisi. Any other e-comments?
We have no e-comments, so that concludes our public comments.
All right. Well, is there a motion to receive and file the chief's report?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Horvath, second by Lowenstein. All right. Thank you, Chief. Do we need a vote on the receive and file, or any objections to receiving and filing it? Nope. All right. Thank you. Let's move on to our next agenda item. And items for discussion prior to action, discussion and possible action on the Planning Commission's recommendations of amendments to the Redondo Beach Municipal Code regarding setbacks for accessory structures in residential zones and other projections in all zones. To abbreviate it. Director Forbes, welcome.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so item N1 is a discussion item to consider the Planning Commission's recommendations of amendments to the Redondo Beach Municipal Code, Title 10, Chapter 2, Zoning and Land Use, which is the inland zoning, and Title 10, Chapter 5, the Coastal Land Use Plan Implementing Ordinance, or coastal zoning, pertaining to setbacks for accessory structures in residential zones and standards for building and other projections in all zones, and consideration of a California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, exemption for the proposed amendments. Last year, the City Council took actions that triggered the need to review the zoning code provisions related to two sections of the zoning code. The first is related to accessory structures in residential zones, sections 10-2.1500. I don't know if you caught that. It's 10-2.1500 and for inland, and 10-5.1500 for coastal. This emanated from that decision on that recent appeal from last year. The second potential code revision is related to buildings and other projections in all zones. As sections 10-2.1522 for inland, and then 1522 under 10-5 for coastal. And this was consideration of revisions, and it came as a referral to staff from City Council related to allowing air conditioner units in required setbacks that they're currently not allowed. So the Planning Commission considered these two sections of code and considered the potential code revisions at their January 2022 meeting. Enclosed in the packet is the recommendations that they made in the resolution. And I'll explain each of the two sections of the code separately and then present the Planning Commission's recommendations specific to the air conditioner units. So the first, we'll start with the accessory structures issue. The need to revise this section of code comes from an appeal that went before the Planning Commission and then on to City Council for the property at 2015 Spire Lane, Unit B, last spring. If you recall, the property owners of that site submitted an administrative design review application to allow an accessory structure attached to the rear elevation of their main home, which encroached into the rear setback. I had denied that application, citing the section of the zoning code, which requires a minimum separation of 5 feet between the dwelling unit and accessory structure. In addition, between two accessory structures, as you can see here in the current section of the code. The appeal to the Planning Commission was heard on March 18th, where a resolution was adopted approving the accessory structure's roof. That was appealed to the City Council. As you may recall, the appeal was made on the grounds that the Planning Commission's decision was attempting to conform with a structure that was already built and didn't comply with this section of code. The City Council considered and denied the appeal at the public hearing on June 1st, and they upheld the Planning Commission decision to approve the accessory structure's roof being attached to the rear elevation of the main home. Now, the City Council, you made some distinctions that were not addressed as part of the Planning Commission's decision, which is leading us to the revisions to this section of code. In your deliberations, Council made distinctions between structures and buildings based on the definitions of those two things. And the specific discussion at the meeting was that the accessory building is defined as a detached building, which is subordinate to the main building or structure on the same lot, whereas the definition of accessory structure did not have a stipulation regarding being attached or detached. And because it was a structure, it was determined that it did not need to have the 5-foot setback from the dwelling unit. And the terms structures and buildings are used interchangeably in this section of code, which led to ambiguity on whether the subsection is intended to apply to only buildings or intended to include setbacks for accessory structures. So per the two distinct definitions where accessory building is the only one defined to be detached, council determined that the structure's roof could be attached. But what we determined, in that determination, the language needed to be revised in order to clarify the intent for future interpretation. So that's where this is before you now. And in the Planning Commission's recommendations, they consider various options on how to clarify the language. The recommendation here is a little bit more in line with the City Council's determination. And so what we have you can see with the underline is additions, and strike through is the deletions and what's proposed. And these are the same in each, except for, in the inland, there's the reference to mobile home parks. That's not necessary under the coastal zoning, but we put both here just so you could see it. The subheading adds structures, in what's being proposed by the Planning Commission. So it makes it clear that these regulations are intended to be address both buildings and structures. The language would require a 5-foot setback between the dwelling unit and the accessory building. And as well, a 5-foot setback would be required between all accessory structures. But in this scenario, an accessory structure that does not qualify as an accessory building, meaning that it's not enclosed, could be attached to the main dwelling unit, whereas an accessory building would need to have that 5-foot setback. So that kind of goes in line with the definitions of building and the definition of structure. And then there's also a requirement in this option of 5 feet between accessory structures. And that's to limit a string of attached accessory structures that would then cover most of the rear of the site. So again, these proposed revisions clarify the interpretation City Council made in deciding that appeal last June. And we put both of these two items together in this review for Planning Commission and in this consideration at Council, because they're in the same section of code and relative to similar items. And then the next issue is City Council had directed staff to revisit the projections into required setbacks. As you can see, it's 1522 instead of 1500 for what we were previously talking about. And I put here the regulations are basically they are the same in coastal and inland. So I instead of having both on the same page, it's the same information. Under this section, air conditioners and other mechanical and plumbing equipment aren't currently addressed or allowed in setbacks. So a little bit of background: since March of 2020, when COVID hit and the emergency orders went into place, the planning divisions started seeing a significant increase in the requests for air conditioning permits. More people were working from home, kids were doing remote schooling, and generally people were spending more time at home. But unfortunately, to retrofit an already developed site for air conditioning, often the only areas available are in the required setbacks. So per the current regulations, air conditioners are not permitted in the required setbacks and setbacks between buildings, which would be like R2 and R3, the setbacks between the two or three dwelling units. And City Council requested that staff consider how to address this in the zoning code. Since we were already looking to revise this section of code to address air conditioners, there were a few cleanup items that came up in that appeal process as well. that we wanted to make sure that we clarify. So I'll go through those as well. They're basically addressing, defining decks, porches, patios, and patio covers in the required setbacks. And also during our discussion at the appeal, there was an idea of allowing administrative approval of the height of architectural features such as pergolas or patio covers to go from 9 feet to 10 feet, because if you remember in the discussion, it was, could you even open a door if it was a 9-foot height, out into that space if it's that close to the building? So, with that proximity. So we also address that, and you'll see that in the regulations. I'll go over it in the next couple slides, just so that you have an idea of what has been proposed for changes. And we're going to start here under definitions. We made some clarifications for decks, patios, patio covers, and porches. And those will show up a little bit later in the language as well. But this was under definitions, revising and adding definitions for unenclosed decks, patios, porches. The unenclosed deck definition is similar language to the unenclosed balcony. And the new definition of patio explains the proximity to the grade level and materials and clarifies a patio cover for shade protection. And then a definition of porch that was not previously defined, but was included in different set parts of the code. It is different than a patio or deck. So we made sure to add that definition to the regulations. And then going on to the next slide, again, the underline is for deletion, strike through, or additions, deletions are strike through. Under the proposed revisions here, you'll see water heaters had actually been included under architectural features. It was the only thing that was not an architectural feature that was included in this section. So you'll see later that we included it in the new mechanical and plumbing equipment subheading, but we ended up taking it out of here. It was not really an appropriate category under architectural features. And then also, we ended up putting in subheadings. Basement light wells had actually been the only subheading, even though it was addressing architectural features and windows. So we just kind of broke that out here. So the biggest thing here was, organizing this a little bit better and then moving water heaters to another location. Oops. And then under the next section, this is where, we had some cleanup in referencing unenclosed decks and adding porches. And the big thing here is in the side and rear setbacks, acknowledging that we're talking about uncovered decks, porches are, something separate. And so it was just really making sure that we had those definitions and had the language tied to this section. And then the next, this is where we talk about, I mentioned we had the patio covers was defined under patios. That was a feature that we talked about during the appeal process, that it really didn't end up qualifying as a patio feature, what they had proposed, because it was more than 9 feet in height. So here we did two things. We added patio cover to acknowledge it as an architectural feature. And then also, going to that point of, increasing the administrative design review authority to 10 feet in height, so that if it was in proximity to a doorway, it's not now going to conflict with that. It would be at a height where the door could open underneath that. And on to the next. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of the addressing the air conditioner issue. This is a proposed new subsection to address mechanical and plumbing equipment, and to get to the referral regarding air conditioners. And per the Planning Commission's recommendations, air conditioners and ventilator fans are considered mechanical equipment, whereas water heaters, tankless water heaters, water softeners are considered plumbing equipment. Ultimately, what the Planning Commission is recommending is to allow the following mechanical, and plumbing projections that are listed here. They removed water heaters, as I mentioned, from the architectural features and placed it in this new subsection. This allows plumbing and mechanical equipment to project into a required rear setback or a required setback between buildings. So this is allowing both plumbing and mechanical. And it's other than new construction, because the interest is for new construction to really incorporate it into their design, into their buildable area, rather than defaulting to putting the air conditioners and mechanical and the plumbing in the required setbacks just automatically. The recommendations are also to allow plumbing equipment to project up to 1/2 of the required rear yard setback, or 30 inches, whichever is less. So it's just allowing the plumbing to project into that rear yard. And then allowing mini splits air conditioners, which are wall units, to project up to 1/2 of the required side yard setback, or 30 inches, whichever is less, other than new construction. And that these units are to cool an individual room rather than a full air conditioner unit condenser that cools an entire home, and actually has creates a lot more noise to it. And it also takes up a lot more space, the regular air conditioner units, versus the mini splits that they project off the wall of the building. So this would not allow other mechanical equipment, such as the full air conditioner unit for the entire home, to be located in the side setback, but does allow the plumbing to be located in the side setback. But it has that restriction of the 30 inches or 1/2 of that required yard, whichever is less. This would require the mechanical equipment and plumbing equipment within the required setbacks to comply with and have a manufacturer rating to meet the Redondo Beach Municipal Code noise regulations, and also requires mechanical and plumbing equipment within required setbacks to be screened from public view. It doesn't mean that they have to have screening all the way around it. It's just that if it's something that's visible from the public eye, that they would need to screen that. And then the remainder of this, the 10-2 and 10-5.1522 did not change. So I only went over those areas where there were proposed recommended changes from the Planning Commission. The reason for limiting the air conditioner units in the side yards versus the rear yards were for a couple of reasons. One is, first, we have received a lot of complaints over the years when an air conditioner unit was illegally placed in a side yard setback. It's that proximity to the adjacent homes. It's significantly more than when you're in a rear setback. Even when you have a 10-foot minimum, 15-foot average of a rear setback, it's still, you're going to have that, and whatever is behind it's going to have that. So you're going to be a good 20, 30 feet away from the next structure, versus a side yard setback, even when it's like the larger 5-foot side yard setbacks, and your unit is now a couple feet off of the house, so it's already projecting into that side yard setback. It's only going to be 7-8 feet away from the next house, and that's a good stretch if you allowed it in the side yard setback. So it's that noise that was one of the main issues or concerns about having it in the side yard setback. But then also there was an inquiry on whether or not the fire department requires access to the side yard setbacks. And we reached out to the fire department, and they clarified that the California Fire Code does not have any specific language about a physical pathway requirement in a side yard. But they did note that since the setback requirements are established in the zoning code, it seems that Redondo Beach doesn't have any standard requirements for encroachments, directly related to fire, but they are interpreting the code as allowing, architectural features to project only up to 30 inches. So it would still allow for additional room for the fire department personnel to adequately access the exterior of the property in an emergency situation. So if the Planning Commission recognized that if air conditioners had to be set further away from the actual dwelling unit and would encroach even further into a side yard setback, that it may inhibit that ability for or discourage this kind of, they wanted to discourage this type of impediment during an emergency. So there are two different factors there. One was the proximity. There'd be a lot, the noise impact would be more significant in a side yard. And then as well, wanting to just, take into consideration fire department concerns. And with that, so the Planning Commission recommendations were made by a resolution that was in your packet. I went through what those recommended changes are. This item, agenda item, allows the council to consider those recommendations, provide direction to staff, provide a direction to staff on finalizing the proposed revisions that would be brought back to council at a later date as ordinances. We didn't want to just come in and make an assumption that this was going to be the ordinance, but allow you to make any adjustments that you would see fit. And then we could formally amend the sections of the zoning code. And just as for a note, Planning Commission did find that these proposed revisions would be CEQA exempt. So as you're considering this moving forward. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I can always pull that back up if you want to see any of the language, but I'll open it up.
Thank you. So for that's a long discussion. I'm wondering if at the end of today's discussion, we just elect to continue this and include the full body at some later point on this. These are important decisions, but I'll tell you that for folks who say that we eliminate people who have disagreements, the Planning Commission voted 6-1 on this. And so I didn't contact the 6, I contacted the 1 to find out his rationale. And I actually fully agree with his rationale as it concerns accessory structures in residential zones. We just voted to allow those folks, sorry, I forget their names, but to leave their accessory structure attached. So then they would be like the only people in all of Redondo Beach, right?
No, actually the language that they proposed would allow accessory structures to be attached. It's accessory buildings when it's an enclosed building that would have to be detached. And that was based on what the city council's interpretation was last summer.
I'm reading this proposed revision. Oh, this is proposed revision to the coastal ordinance. And this is the inland ordinance, but these are these our ordinances? Is that what I'm looking at here in the staff report?
Yeah, so the underline and the strike through, in this case I think it's underline, are the proposed revisions that the Planning Commission recommended.
Okay. What page is that? All right. Let me look through this. Then I was looking at the wrong thing, so I'll let you guys go. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, I was going to ask the same thing. So this, let's say, like in the appeal that was heard last spring, the people had basically a fireplace. And they used, if I'm not mistaken, was it a fireplace or was maybe it was, I don't know, TV, chimney, et cetera. Then they had the roof, which was considered a structure. We are saying yes or no that we cannot or can allow a structure to be, structure meaning the roof, to be attached to it.
Yeah, that entirety would have been considered an accessory structure. The chimney with the roof over it, that entirety would have been an accessory structure. And it was just an issue of, and that's what they were saying is, well, this is just the roof to this accessory structure of our fireplace. And it's like, yes, but it's not supposed to be attached per the interpretation. And that was where it was, well, it said only set here, and I'm going to share if you don't mind, I'll share that particular page. We added here, or proposing to add that it's setbacks between buildings and structures, and it's clarifying that both are meant to be regulated. However, the only one that's regulated having the distance between the dwelling unit and it is the accessory building has to have that. So the accessory structure does not have to have that. It's just designating that the minimum distance between a dwelling unit and accessory building on the same site should be 5 feet. And then it's just, here we have the minimum distance between two accessory structures on the same site shall be 5 feet. And existing accessory structures may be modified or expanded. So, I'm confused
because it doesn't say you have to have a separation of 5 feet for the roof. So nobody can do that then?
No, it's the separation of 5 feet would only be between an accessory building, which is an enclosed building, and the dwelling unit. Any accessory structures have to be separated from each other, but an accessory structure that's not an accessory building could be attached to the dwelling unit.
Director,
that's confusing to me.
Yeah, where does it say that? I agree with Todd.
Can I interrupt real quick, Councilmember Lowenstein?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't, if we're intending by silence to say that a dwelling unit and an accessory structure need not be separated by any distance, meaning they can be attached, why don't we just say that point blank? So can we add that? We could add that.
Yeah, and that's why we're doing this as a discussion item. So let me grab my.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep people to be prohibited from having a roof between a structure. Let's say somebody has an ADU, right? And they want to cover it so that they don't have to walk out in the rain between their ADU and the main building. Do we want to prohibit that? I guess we don't. We just need to clarify.
And that's a great point, because that would be two accessories. Unless like that was part of how they proposed their ADU. But yeah, you could,
ADU, a dwelling unit or a building?
It's an accessory. It's an accessory
building.
Accessory building, yeah.
Okay. So maybe we make an exception also for that if it's a ADU, accessory dwelling unit, that an accessory structure can connect to a dwelling unit and an accessory dwelling unit. But what you're thinking of, Councilmember Lowenstein, is a thin sliver that's a walkway. And what somebody could end up doing with that is you have an accessory structure and you have a residence and you build a huge, roof connecting the two. And now you've essentially almost provided a totally, not enclosed. It's not enclosed on the side on two walls, but it's enclosed on two. It is enclosed on two walls. So I wonder if we need to, what do you think about that, Director Forbes? Is that a concern? If we end up essentially, if the people who came before us in the public hearing, if they had the space to, they had an accessory structure where the fire pit was, accessory dwelling unit where the fire pit was, is that essentially something we're going to allow when we want to allow?
If you don't want to allow that, you want to have that separation between, they may each have an accessory structure attached to them, like the main dwelling unit and the ADU may have accessory structures attached to them. But if you don't want one that attaches to both, we could, write that language that specifies that any accessory structure attached to a dwelling unit cannot be attached to another accessory.
What Councilor Lowenstein's getting to is you should be able to attach. You should be able to fully attach with a roof for the purpose of walking in the rare rain from your home to your dwelling unit. You should be able to essentially have a covered area to walk.
Yeah, I'm not sure the reason for not allowing that. What architecturally is the problem? There probably is no reason, right?
No, I don't think that, that the issue was, I think that there was a concern, we gave different options, and I think the Planning Commission was concerned about only considering the separation between an accessory building and the main structures, that there could be like accessory structures connecting to each other. And not having separation between them. Now, with that, there's still going to be some requirement for outdoor living space that has to be open to the sky. There's a limit to the amount of total space that you could have for accessory structures. So that could be addressed through that. You could take out that section that's addressing the minimum distance between accessory structures and just have that be the minimum distance between two accessory buildings on the same site shall be 5 feet. It's up to you. This was not an easy one for them to consider either. And we gave, various options, but I think that they didn't want to be too strict or too, not considering enough. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess, one of the things I think about is people adding space onto their house and considering it part of the house, right? What is it? Like a bonus room or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different thing, right? This is an accessory versus say, adding an extra room in, enclosing it, and then having it attached, right? That's a different type of thing. I think we should allow people to be able to roof the walkway between a structure and the main building. I don't see any reason unless there's some type of a safety issue. But I'm open to ideas. I just, in this case, yeah.
I was going to say, I think with that, let me go ahead and share real quick again. I think in this case, you could, just have this say setbacks between buildings, period. The minimum distance between a dwelling unit and an accessory building on the same site shall be 5 feet, and just leave it at that and not have any distance between accessory structures, so that if you had awnings, or an awning that could connect to each, that can be connected and doesn't have to have that setback.
Yeah, and I think one of the things on in the definition of the structure should be roofs. Right. I think that was one of the issues was, if I'm recalling correctly, the structure, staff was saying the roof is part of the building, but it really was a structure, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, no, it was the roof to an accessory structure. That was where the issue was.
Right.
But it was also a roof that attached to, it wasn't a roof for the actual dwelling unit. But yeah, it was very complex. I think to address that, you could start out with just doing this as setbacks between buildings, period. The minimum distance between a dwelling unit and an accessory building on the same site shall be 5 feet.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I don't have no problem with that. But the structure part, I think, whether it's for what was interesting, I was on site with the owner, and they showed me that it wasn't just for rain, but there was also heat. There was heat lamps that were embedded in the structure, so I thought that was a clever idea of doing it. I don't have a problem with people doing it on there, as long as the setback from the back is taken care of, and we have those minimum setbacks from the property line. That's fine. I have no problem with that. So anyway, that's my feedback. If we have to bring this back again, I guess it is what it is. That's fine. But
yeah, well, we're going to have to bring it back anyway. That's why I wanted to bring it as a discussion item, so that you had the opportunity to make these revisions.
Okay, so was that clear what I was asking about, whether allowing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. One thing, Director Forbes, that I noticed is that if you do leave the language as is, existing accessory structures may be modified or expanded is in of itself also ambiguous, because of that whole, when you have a roof eave, is that an existing accessory structure? And are they going to expand that into another? But now that I see that there's no setback requirement anyways.
If you remove the setback requirement between those, it's not going to be an issue. It's just going to be limited at the point that they have a maximum square footage that they can have for coverage.
Councilmember MD.
Okay. So the questions that were just asked now have confused me. So now that you have an accessory structure, an accessory building, are you including ADUs into that definition? I mean, these are not dwelling units, are they?
An ADU it's considered an accessory structure and an accessory building. And yeah, so it is, so to have that awning attached to an accessory building, like you would need to remove the minimum distance required between accessory structures on the same site.
No, between.
Wait, Zane, wait, hold on. So I'm trying to understand this. So you need to have, so let's just look at it practically, right? So you have, now you're changing, you have a ADU, and before you had to have 5 feet between the original dwelling structure and an accessory dwelling unit. Now you're saying you don't have to have those at all.
We actually can't require that per state regulation.
You can't require a setback anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then in this case, you have your accessory structure or building, but right now you're trying to make it so that you had 5 feet in between. That's what it's saying. There's a minimum distance. So you're saying you can't have that, but yet it's in here.
No, what's proposed is saying that you can't have, you have to have a 5 foot setback between accessory structures, which includes accessory buildings. So, because that's a subset of accessory structures. So you wouldn't be able to have, an accessory structure that's, similar to, like some kind of patio cover. You couldn't have that attached to the ADU if you require a 5 foot setback between the accessory structure, which would be that patio cover, and the accessory building of the accessory dwelling unit.
So can you have an ADU or any kind of structure right up against the dwelling units then?
Technically, you can have an ADU up against the dwelling unit. They have to meet building code, if they're in the streamline, but I don't want to have to go into, most of them are going to fall under streamlined. We can't require a setback. We recommend a 5 foot setback. They have to meet the building and fire codes. So, if there are openings and they don't have sprinkler system, then they're going to have a 5 foot setback to meet the building codes. But we can't require a setback between, on the streamline ADUs, between an ADU and the main dwelling unit.
Okay, so then the patio cover wouldn't be covered under that?
The patio cover, like if you had some kind of covered roof structure, like like what they have where it was open and it's not a building itself, we can, and that's what we have here, is you can limit it so that has to be separated from any other accessory structure, or which would include accessory buildings. So even though the building itself could be attached to the dwelling unit, having another accessory structure, if they wanted to have a patio cover outside that ADU, technically under this, they wouldn't be able to do that because there'd need to be 5 feet from that accessory dwelling unit, which is an accessory building and structure, and the accessory structure of the awning.
So you're saying
the cover, yeah.
So you're saying that the patio cover, when it's attached to the ADU, is technically it's all an ADU, and that has to be 5 feet. No. So I don't understand.
That those would have to be 5 feet away from each other, which is defeating the purpose And it's because the ADU is it's a very good point. It's not something that came up in our conversation at Planning Commission about ADUs and them having to be separated from other accessory structures.
I think that's what was happening, Laura. Remember in that conversation where they're like, well, we have the 5 feet coming off of this, and then we have the 5 feet coming off of this, and then there's a gap in the middle, right?
We're supposed to be making this clear, and it's not being clear at all. It's not clear at all. Anyway, I going back to what I was originally raised my hand for. In there it says it has which allow a mini split air conditioner to project up to 1/2 of the required side yard setback or 30 inches, whichever is less, other than new construction. And you said you didn't want to include new construction in this because you wanted them to incorporate it in their design. So you're wanting them, so anybody that's a new construction, you want them to have the air conditioning. You want the building to be small enough so that the air conditioner can then fit within the setback.
So that it's not in the side setback, but actually in the buildable area of the site that's not a required setback.
So you're basically wanting the new construction to be smaller.
Or they can find a cutout that would, there are plenty of fenestrations that they may do, but for them to find a cutout of where they're going to put their air conditioner unit that's going to allow for that, but not force it into the required setbacks.
So why would any new construction build it? Because now you're forcing, instead of me selling a 4,000 square foot house, I'm now selling a 3,950 square foot house. And so why would they do that compared to, and just let the owner then put in the air conditioner afterwards?
That was something that the Planning Commission added afterwards. I don't know if they realized that was, I don't know if they were thinking that permanently, like once it's, built, like anything built after this, but that's not how they put it in the language. It was basically, except for new construction. And your point is a very good one. Somebody could construct it, sell it. It's no longer new construction when you come in with a new application to add an air conditioner unit.
Exactly. So exactly. So if you don't want to if you don't want to continue the practice of having air conditioners in the setback, it seems that the suggestion that you just kind of made is that after certain, anything built before or after certain year can't have it. Could be this year. That would make more sense than trying to distinguish between new construction and just adding an air conditioner. Because now you're going to get into, okay, well, what if I only tear down half my building and then I go rebuild it? Is that new construction? I mean, where does that fit in to that? So, and then at what point does somebody remodeling, is that a new construction? And would that apply? I
think those are great points. It was something that the Planning Commission added to, the staff recommendations. They didn't clarify any further than just adding that particular language.
I mean, I hear what they're saying, that they didn't want to allow new construction to be able to add, to take chunks out of the side yard setback. But it seems very confusing as to you either make the rule for everybody or you don't make it at all. Or you could say, like you said, after a certain year, which would be to this year, next year, then you can no longer put in the new that. But then you're going to get into.
But you're going to still have somebody. There's going to be somebody else who's going to, I didn't get it. I didn't feel like I needed air conditioning in that time frame, and then they want to come in with an application. It was something that the Planning Commission added when they were making their motion at the end. I don't know that it was, that was not part of the staff recommendation. It was just in general, where does it make more sense to have, which required setbacks and what would you allow in each?
Yeah, that has to be revisited because you can't have it be for a certain, I feel you can't do it for a certain group of people to have it that way. Because when people immediately do new construction, it doesn't, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a builder. It could be you yourself. You're you're rebuilding your house. Now, does that apply to them? They no longer can have their air conditioning in the side yard?
It's still going to go, it's still going to go to the same point of if once you're completed with it and you get your house is finalized and that permit is closed out, you can come in with a new application that's now it's an existing structure and it's no longer. So it didn't really, I think, meet what the Planning Commission's stricter concern or thought was, but that's, I can't speak for them. This was exactly the language they asked to put in there.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
So on that subject, let me just make my comments. Here in the D3, I think there's a lot of this occurring. There's a lot of requests for, and probably D2, but a request for AC units. I have my neighbor unit B to the left of me who put one in when they bought the place. And I can't blame them. They got a little kid and they live in the B unit. They're probably not getting a ton of breeze. They need the coolness when it gets hot. With that said, I'm assuming it's in the setback. What's annoying about it isn't so much the visual of it, it's how loud it gets. If I have my window open, it's noxious. The noise is noxious. So I got to close my windows as soon as they turn on their AC. And then in the summer, that's all summer long, even though we have this cool breeze, coming if you're not in a B unit, coming through your place. So I'd be more interested in regulating the sounds, the level of sounds made by the air conditioners, because I know that there are new air conditioners that are quieter. But to what extent do we know anything about that, Director Forbes?
There was a member of the public that presented and talked about what they had evaluated. What we did include in the proposed language. Now, as far as enforcement, would be certainly we can review it at the time of the building permit, but mechanical equipment and plumbing equipment within the required setbacks shall comply with and have manufacturer ratings to meet the Redondo Beach Municipal Code noise regulations. That's what we put in there, and I don't know if you want it, I don't know how you could tighten it up more, but at least we could be evaluating the manufacturer ratings of what's being proposed.
Got it. All right. Councilmember Horvath.
Yeah, so it is a very good point that Councilmember Obaji brings up. Do we need to specify what that decibel limit is, for what is acceptable? It's one thing to say, hey, here in section 4-24 of the RBMC, it has to meet that criteria, but what is that criteria and how does a layperson, interpret that? The biggest point is it noisy? And I guess while we're on this topic, the one thing I would say, the couple residents that contacted me related to the side yard setbacks was related specifically to air conditioning. So I'll just use my house as an example. There's, I think, 3.5 feet between my house and the midsection. And so it's maybe 7 feet between myself and my neighbor. But if I was going to put air conditioning in this house, it would be the most logical place to put the condenser would be on that side yard in between our homes, because that's where it would connect up to the ducting quite easily, without having to Mickey Mouse, the entire process. But I know nothing about modern day condenser units and what they can do. I would never put like those wall units through each of the rooms, in the house. That seems to me like it would be prohibitively expensive. So I don't want to necessarily preclude people from having an option in the side yard setback for an air conditioner. But I would like to the point that the Mayor Pro Tem made, if we were to allow it, how can we make it so that it is less egregious from a noise attenuation perspective and I guess there has to be some administrative review on your perspective, because if my neighbor had if we had a fence in between our yards, then that creates the problem you were referring to that the fire department mentioned, right? There's not necessarily a potential passable space. Not a big deal between our yards because there is no fence, but a lot of the homes in the R1As or the R2s, R3s, they have very narrow spaces that are blocked by fences. So this is more complicated than one would hope it would be. To Todd's point made earlier, I agree with most of what he was saying, but as everybody was saying, there's a little bit of ambiguity in the language there that I think we would really just need to tighten up and make sure that's clear, not only for the person that's reading the code, but I think for future planning directors. I think that's been one of your challenges, right? You are constantly trying to interpret code that you didn't write, and you're doing the best you can, right? But I think we want to make it as clean as possible so that future staff members who are kind of being the adjudicator in these situations can go, well, this is pretty clear. I don't need to really think twice about it. And yeah, those are my initial thoughts here. If you're taking notes, trying to think if there was anything else that stood out to me there.
Okay.
Yeah, other than that, I think I'm good.
All right. Here's what I'll add. I have pulled up the Redondo Beach noise ordinance, which does seem like it's pretty specific. I think we've heard in other meetings that we do not have a means to measure the decibel level in the city. Moreover, if I wanted to complain about the decibel level, I guess unlike a leaf blower, the AC unit's not going to move. Because I did call about a leaf blower today and I don't think anybody responded, but I get there are more important things in the city right now. There are, and I will say that I just verified here that if you go to buy an AC, it does give you the noise level, and it says 55 decibels, which is consistent with our most restrictive noise level. But here's a question for you now that we're on the noise ordinance. It seems like in our low density, our R1, the presumed ambient level, maximum level is lower than, and maybe I'm just reading this very quickly and incorrectly, whereas in the high density areas, it's higher. Do you know why that is the case, or have you looked at this at all? Brandy.
No, I haven't evaluated what is in the noise ordinance and why. I'm sorry, it's really, really
small, right? You can't really.
I need to read.
Here we go. I don't know if you can see this better.
Yeah, that's much better.
All right. Low density is like presumed ambient level 45. R3, R4, 55. I probably got to read this a little more, but if maybe we could get some, when it comes back, if we could get some analysis of to the extent that any of this needs to change, and also how we're going to deal with enforcement. Is it going to be based on, and it may very well be, look, we don't need to buy a decibel meter. We just need to look up the model and find out what the decibel noise is.
I think it would be, per what, we have proposed for language here, is that they would have to demonstrate that their manufacturer ratings for an air conditioner unit are going to meet the, they would have to provide what that, and we would have to, as we're going through the inspections, continue to verify that that's the same air conditioner unit that they specified in there, so they didn't change it out later with something else.
Okay, and I see that the city manager came on, so maybe he has some something to add here.
Yeah, I think what we can do when we bring the item back, as you said, is provide a little more depth on that and what our enforcement capabilities are. You heard tonight from Chief Hoffman regarding kind of the muffler noise and some of the problems of trying to address that type of a requirement. But, you know, it might be a slightly different story if we're testing noise on an AC unit in an evening or at various times of the day. So we'll look into that, and we'll combine sort of community development and police resources to evaluate that possibility.
And right now, thank you. Right now, is a person required, if they put a window AC unit, are they required to get a permit from the city? Currently?
I don't think so, because it doesn't require the electrical, you know, and it doesn't require the electrical and mechanical permits that would, you know, because it's just something that plugs in. So like if you had
so this is going to be a new requirement that we're going to impose relative to installing an accessory structure.
Right. But when you're talking about an air conditioner unit, and when it requires a permit, it requires what's called an MEP permit. It's a mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So it's going to require it for the mechanical and probably for the electrical. They're going to have to upgrade something with the electrical on that. So they have to submit an actual permit to have that type of unit installed, because it's very specific.
Oh, she froze up, right?
Froze.
All right.
Yeah, we may have lost.
So if she's gone, since this is recorded,
It make noise.
all right. Since she's cut out, let me just share, since it's being recorded anyways, my suggestions for a change here. Unless she can go any way, obviously you can change it to whatever, I think what she suggested, which is just clarifying. But an additional clarification could be, there shall be no setback requirement between an accessory structure on the one hand and primary or accessory dwelling units or buildings on the other. And it doesn't really matter whether you use the on the one hand and on the other language or not, just to help clarify for reading. And I would add that an existing structure is a standalone or connected accessory structure other than a naturally extending eave of a roof. So that people don't say that an existing structure is, it comes from the roof. And we clarify that a little bit and reduce that ambiguity. Those are just suggestions. I don't really care, as long as we're comfortable with everything when you know, eventually whatever we reach when it comes back. And Hattie, you're back.
Yeah.
All right. We didn't hear like the last essentially minute or two of what you're saying. And I just shared on the screen, which if you go back, I'll show it again. My suggested language for adding to these so that we don't have ambiguities as to what an existing structure is, and also clarifying that there is no setback requirement between an accessory structure and an accessory dwelling unit or primary dwelling unit. Anything you want to add, Brandy?
I mean, that's, if you're interested in that language where you'd still want to have setbacks between accessory structures otherwise, unless they're attached to, accessory buildings or, any buildings. That's one way of approaching that. What I was saying, we were talking about the window air conditioner units.
Right.
And I was saying that, those are not, they wouldn't require an MEP, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing permit, because it's not, they're plugging it into a wall outlet. It's not something that's permanently installed. And it's also cooling one room rather than the entire house. So it's not as It doesn't mean that they don't make noise. It's just that that would not be something that would be in violation.
Right. But we could see how if every unit in the field in the R3 ended up, every older unit ended up adding a window AC unit, we would have a lot more noise and what's called a nuisance in the area. So I do think that's an important component that the Planning Commission put in, which is the cap on the sound level. All right, Councilmember Horvath, you still have your hand up?
Yeah, just going back to the noise, I'm just looking up here and Brandy, maybe it's something we want to, and it's clearly not part of this, but it says here, if you're looking for a quiet AC, make sure it's within 50 to 60 decibel levels. Most air conditioner units are between 37 and 82 decibel units. So I don't know if we want to specify, and Mayor Pro Tem Obaji, did mention, it seems weird that larger R1 lots would have a lower decibel rating compared to the areas that are more dense. Now, granted, all those ranges there, 55 is saying here it's the same as an electric toothbrush or a coffee percolator. So it's not, a normal conversation is 60 decibels. So it's not necessarily crazy high, but, we may just want to reevaluate that as part of this discussion, because I think, most of the houses, especially, like mine that were built in the 60s, they don't have air conditioning. But clearly, as you pointed out, during this COVID time where people were working from home and wanting to kind of isolate from noises outside, they wanted to have AC. So I guess, just food for thought as we're trying to figure out how to craft language to come back in terms of a public hearing.
Thank you. Yes, good comments. I agree with those. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, I like your language, Zane. Let's make sure it applies to both inland and coastal, because you had it under coastal. I assume you want it to be, meaning the language that defining an accessory structure doesn't preclude a roof.
Yeah, but if Randy has a way to clean this up and essentially achieve the same with fewer words and simpler way, then by all means go for it. I'm not committed to this language.
Okay, cool. That's it. That's the only thing I want to say. Thank you.
So, oh, she's frozen. But in any event, is there somebody else in the? I guess the city manager can let her know what we decided. All right. So is there, I guess, a motion to send it back?
Mayor Pro Tem, I need to ask
public comment. Sorry.
Speak on this item. So please raise your hand if you'd like to speak to this item. There we go.
All right.
Rolf Struttenberg. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Director Forbes, and City Manager Mike Wazanski. Congratulations again. It's been waiting a long time to say that. I don't think you want to get rid of the 5-foot setback for accessory structures. If you remember the appeal subject, it had the large stone structure that was the fireplace and TV. If you get rid of the 5-foot setback from the main dwelling, that essentially could now go from the dwelling, the wall of the dwelling, to the fence at the back of the property, because there is no rear setback required for an accessory structure. I don't think you want to do that. Make it building and structure, require a 5-foot distance between them. And if you remember, the caveat that was found for that one was the very narrow part for the roof. And that's what the Planning Commission voted on, was the accessory structure's roof. And that fell under 1522, where it said 30-inch of eave is allowed from both the accessory structure and the main dwelling. So therefore that covered and spanned that 5 foot. And it didn't say that they had to be detached. It was a very narrow thing. But I think getting rid of the 5-foot separation for an accessory structure would be really problematic. You could block off the entire rear of a house by doing that. You could take that big stone structure, turn it 90 degrees, run it from the back of the house to the back fence, and it would completely block it. And I don't think you want to do that. You want to keep that 5-foot path there. So there's going to be, if there's a way to word that, keep them both in there. And then also the roof is already in there with those eave overhang things. That's already in 1522. That's what allowed that appeal to go the way that it did. And then the second part, you've talked about the plumbing and mechanical aspects. I think that's a great thing that you're discussing that. The mini splits tend to be a retrofit, but you can use them on new construction. One of the things that I saw that may be difficult is the new requirement for screening them from public view, because a lot of these things have minimum distances from the unit itself to any screen or anything, any kind of even non-flammable structure. For example, a tankless water heater may stick out 10 inches from the side of your house. It then requires a minimum of 24 inches clearance to anything, any kind of structure or any screening. And that would be 34 inches there. And you would have to then build the screen outside of the 30 inches. AC has the same kind of things. You have to have a minimum distance, not only from the wall to the AC, but also in front, with basically free air in front of the AC so that it can flow the air it needs. So the screening needed, maybe look at that kind of carefully. And as far as like screening a tankless water heater, screening it is going to make it look worse than it probably does just as it is. So there is a lot of things to consider here. The key one, I would not get rid of the 5-foot separation between the accessory structure. Keep it accessory building and accessory structures. I'm here for questions if you want, and I can talk with Eva afterwards.
Thank you, School Board Member Strutzenberg, for coming back since you were previously on the Planning Commission. Really appreciate it. One thing I wanted to ask you, go ahead, Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, I'm glad that Rolf pointed that out. So if there's 30 inches from the eave from the building and 30 inches from the structure, then there's your 5 feet. That's fine with me as long as I must have missed that. I saw that in there, but I didn't know exactly how it translated, but I think I'd be okay with that. I think he might be right about this in terms of but as long as the eaves are considered a roof, I don't know. I mean, they're extension of the roof, right? And they're also extension of the structure. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Brandy?
That was where we had the problem because, the Planning Commission's interpretation was one thing. City Council interpreted a little bit differently as far as recognizing the definitions. You as a council looked at the definitions, and that the definition of accessory building had in it detached versus accessory structure did not have that requirement of detached. And that was where you made your distinction. The Planning Commission's, what they were saying is that the intent of if you could have, 30 inches here and 30 inches here, and it meets your 5 feet and they're basically touching, it's basically doing the same thing as having the accessory structure's roof attached to it. But that's not what the language of the actual code said. They just saw that as that's meeting the same intent. So what we wanted to do is, and it's going to take some time apparently, is to clear up this language so that it's crystal clear that it's not just, well, that's kind of what it's doing the same thing anyway, but rather be very clear on whether you want to allow an accessory structure, and that would include its roof, to attach to the main dwelling unit or not.
Well, I'm okay with that happening, the roof. I'm also okay with keeping the distance from the structure 5 feet as well too, or the building 5 feet. I mean, I'm okay with that. That's fine. So I don't know if that would be considered, the problem is that some roofs, if you do that, then the structure itself will be 5 feet, but the roof itself can extend, or the walkway can extend. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Structure is what you're describing. A structure, a roof, like a walkway, is a structure, right? You said previously that you would like it to connect to the building, so they can walk from their home to their accessory dwelling unit out of the rain.
Not just the accessory dwelling unit. Like if you recall what the proponent of the project said, they had an actual structure. So it wasn't a building, it was a structure. And so I was okay with that, the way they had it. I was fine with it. But the problem is that, as Brandy just mentioned, the language was inconclusive and it was open to interpretation.
Right, but now I just heard you saying something about a 5-foot setback. So what are you saying you want a 5-foot setback for?
The 5-foot setback between the actual structure. Well, okay, this is where the problem is the roof is considered the structure. Right? But it really isn't. It's an overhang.
But even if you have that, here was what the issue was with that was we said, well, you could do that. You could actually, have the roof overhang the 30 inches and having a 30-inch awning come off the building. But the problem is then they have to actually build, they were utilizing the main dwelling unit as part of the structure that would hold up that roof.
Right.
They did not have separate pillars they would have had to have installed separate pillars to have it.
Our revision would make that okay, correct?
I don't. What Todd's mentioning is they'd end up having to put the pillars in.
No,
they could have the roof attached, but they'd have to put the pillars in 5 feet.
School board member Strutzenberg back. Why is it that we should not allow what we did allow?
Allowing what you did allow was okay, and I think everybody agreed with that. What you're looking to allow now is to allow the structure itself. The structure I would call the vertical part of it that goes to the ground.
Okay.
And not just the roof. So if you remember the appeal structure, it had the great big stone block that had the fireplace and the TV in it.
Right.
And that was along the back wall because there is no setback requirement.
Right.
So that was considered the structure.
Right.
And the roof was part of that. And Brandy did a good job explaining, the fact that, you could each could have 30 inches from the main dwelling and from the accessory structure. And those, they're not, in the case of the accessory structure, it was not required to be detached. The accessory building is. Right. But what you don't want to do is say that you don't need a 5-foot separation between the accessory structure and the building.
You're saying then the fireplace in 5 feet away from the back wall, so it's not so close to the neighbor, right? Is that
not from the back wall? The back wall is fine, and that's the way the code is right now. What you're looking to do is change the code so that you don't require a 5-foot separation between the primary dwelling unit and the accessory structure. Then this new, let's say we take that block chunk with the TV and the fireplace, it could span from the building, the main dwelling, all the way to the back fence or back property line and block off the entire backyard from any side to side motion.
Okay. He's right. And I think what he's projecting is the worst case scenario, that essentially the person puts a roof over their whole backyard and extends the accessory structure, not just this fireplace, but essentially the whole back property line, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, and the roof is not so much the concern for me.
Right,
it's more
the structure where the fireplace is, that stone wall becomes the whole wall. And now you have an entirely enclosed area, which with our changes, that's what would be allowed. Is that it?
The way this is written, you could have a solid stone wall from the back of your house to the back of your property line to the back fence, and there would be no way to get around it.
Didn't Brandy specify earlier that there are still other limitations from areas that have to be open to air and?
For an accessory, here what we were talking about was that the accessory, the proposed, it would be to clarify that the accessory building, something that's completely enclosed. Now that doesn't change, what Mr. Strutzenberg is mentioning is if they say they turn that, right, they turned it to the side and had the fireplace along this side attached to it's the structure with this, and it was still open on the other sides, but it still had a wall. But the thing is, they can do that. It would just have to be that the wall has to be 5 feet, start 5 feet from the dwelling unit. So they could do that now under what the regulations are.
But not with the rewrite.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on how it's rewritten.
Right. The way it's currently rewritten, you would take away that 5-foot separation requirement. Because you took it away.
Correct, but you could still have that wall, except for the 5 feet from the dwelling unit to where the wall starts. But the wall could still then span a significant.
That's what we want. We want that 5 foot between a building or a structure.
Can't you just say you have to have the 5 feet from the building, but the roof itself is not part of the accessory structure? Can you do that?
You could say, or even go further and say the roof itself could be attached to the dwelling unit.
Yeah, that too. So it's a definition of
the support of the structure has to be 5 feet from the dwelling unit, but the roof could connect to the main dwelling unit.
Right. So it's accomplishing both things. It's accomplishing what Rolf says, which I agree, and it's also accomplishing the fact that people can have a covering.
All right. Brandy, did you? There was a consultant that you were working with to develop objective criteria for our residential housing guidelines, right?
Right.
Is this something that you could pick her brain on as to what the best practice would be for this type of thing?
I think it's going to, it's going to be probably very municipality specific, because not every, as we've talked about through our housing discussions over the last year, we have a lot more of that low density multifamily. We have a lot more R2s, R3s, where things are going to be encroaching into a setback that you may not see in an R1. So I can certainly talk to them about it. It's, not necessarily in their scope, and see if, what they've seen that might address it. But I think if, and that was really what the conversation ended up being, is if you want to allow the, have the setback from the structure support has to be has to be at least 5 feet, but the roof can be attached. That would meet what you're trying to accomplish, I think.
Right. In the case that came before us, the roof didn't extend and attach, but the roof of the accessory structure did attach to the primary residence, right? They cut that open and attached there. So,
now, would you want to require the support has to be what's supporting that roof has to be? Because where the issue was is the house itself was then being part of the support of the
But if that's structurally sound, if an engineer signs off on it and goes through the city approvals for that, maybe you require the city to approve it, city engineer to approve it, then it should be fine, right? But why waste square footage for another pillar if the house is able to tolerate the weight, right?
It's just going to be very, I can work on the language for that. Okay. It's just,
All right. Well, I guess the one direction I'd like to provide is think of the largest, most obnoxious thing in a tight area, like where the tall and skinnies are, and is it going to be allowed, and what's the problem is potentially going to pose to adjacent neighbors? Because I think that's what we're not yet totally getting our heads around and hands around is what is the worst case scenario that we're going to allow if we kind of remove this old requirement. All right, so I guess the referral is to staff to return with revisions based on our comments to the extent that that's possible, both as to this ordinance and the accessory, mechanical equipment and the like in the setback. And any revisions to these, or any suggestions for revisions to the sound ordinance that we have, which is RBMC 4-24.301.
I guess the question would be, because we can bring it back, and I think for the section, as I'm understanding it, for the 0.1522, the mechanical and plumbing equipment proposed was to really address the noise, but it seemed like there was still some opening to conversation about whether or not to allow inside setbacks.
Can we, this is a lot to essentially have in one discussion. Can we, when we have it come back, can we have it come back piecemeal? Like as in the first part, I guess this is the accessory structure setbacks as one item on an agenda. Another day we have the other item, and there's no real huge rush for this, right?
You know, there's a lot of interest for the air conditioners. You know, when we had the heat wave a couple weeks ago, there was a lot, and they've missed a season. I mean, we don't consider it. So we're really, maybe that's the thing that comes back first. They can come back separately. We had them both going to Planning Commission for review at the same time because they were same sections of code. It's, when you do want to do revisions, the fewer times you have to send something to the Coastal Commission for review is important. So, but we can bring this back as two different discussions.
City Attorney Webb?
Yeah, I was going to say it probably is best to deal with it at one time, and I would counsel the city council not to bring back the noise as because then it's opening up Pandora's box. I think it would probably be better just to do your own research and put a limit on the number of decibels of the air conditioner. Because if you looked at the section before, we have, there's a very clear investigation procedure and how it's to be done. It's just the city hasn't done it for 20 plus years. When I started the same year as Chief Hoffman, we had a decimal machine that was registered, but over time that no longer was certified and we didn't have people to run it. And also, if you look at the noise ordinance, it depends on whether it's legal, how long it runs. So you can have it be louder if it's only running for a minute, or maybe a little bit less loud if it's running for 15 minutes, and so that becomes an issue. So it makes more sense, rather than taking up noise ordinance, do your due diligence and put in a limit of what, because then it becomes really easy and it doesn't become another unenforced rule.
All right. Well, in that case, and actually based on what city attorney is recommending, I'll say that just doing my preliminary research here, an affordable air conditioning tops, a new one tops out about 55 decibels. Better ones, actually even a cheaper one, $229 tops out at 51 decibels. So I think we're fine if we adopt a 55 decibel cap, or we just kick it to the ordinance as the Planning Commission recommended, even though it is seemingly illogically structured. It still works because our most dense area, I think, is 55. Oh no, they have more dense stuff down in South Redondo. Never mind. All right, so I guess we'll leave it, kicking it to that statute. That's fine with me. We need a motion though, right? So
Mayor Pro Tem, also, I just wanted to mention that there's no e-comments, just for the record.
Thank you for that, Madam Clerk. So,
okay, then I'll make a motion to bring this back with staff corrections to language at one time. It sounds like we should do that at one time. So with sound and noise and accessory structure / definition / et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Todd, would you clarify, is that bring it back as a discussion or bring it back for public hearing and potential ordinance introduction? Because those will be two different things.
Yeah, I would say discussion, because this is going to take more than one more. I would say a discussion, then we can have the public hearing on it. Well, two public hearings.
All right, motion by Councilmember Lowenstein, second by Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Obagi. All right, no more public comments. Nobody else has their hand up, so let's go ahead and take a roll call vote. Councilmember Lowenstein?
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath?
Aye.
Councilmember MD?
I'm going to vote no, only because I think it should come back to an ordinance, because people do want to have the air conditioning. It's kind of urgent to get this going for that. So that's the only reason. I don't disagree with everything that was said. It's just we just need to get going on this for air conditioning.
I mean, I can withdraw my motion and then do that. That's fine.
Let me just go ahead and vote no, in light of what Councilmember MD said. And if somebody now wants to make another motion, go for it.
I'll make a substitute motion that we bring it back as a public hearing with all the items that have been discussed tonight, and then ideally we can fine tune an ordinance that night.
Okay, I'll second that.
All right. Sounds motion by Councilmember Horvath, second by Councilmember Lowenstein. Let's do a roll call vote. Councilmember Lowenstein?
Aye.
That was an aye. Councilmember Horvath?
Aye.
Councilmember MD?
Aye.
All right. And I will vote aye because here in North Redondo, we're just a little further from the coast than you all down there. So it's a little toastier. Barely. It's like 73 degrees rather than 72. All right.
Thank you all. I know that's a lot of conversation and a lot to think about. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Director Forbes. All right, back to our agenda. Let's see if there's anything else. City manager items.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, just a couple tonight. Pleased to announce formally that our Waterfront Economic Development Director and our second assistant to the city manager candidates have both cleared background and will be starting with the city officially on March 14th. So 2 weeks from yesterday. I will likely have more formal announcements regarding who those individuals are next week through the press. But very excited to have them come forward on the. And then the other thing I just want to make the council aware of, it does look like we're nearing the end of the county mask mandate, indoor mask mandate. There's some indications that might be dropped at the local level here by even the end of this week. So what I just want to begin to prepare everybody for is the strong possibility that we might have our first in-person meeting as early as April 5th next month. So I will be bringing an item, I think, to talk about that a little bit more formally on March 15. But we very well could be back in person, depending on everybody's comfort level, beginning in April. So just throwing that out there. There's a lot to do. There's training for use of the dais. We won't have all of the same features you've been largely accustomed to with screen share and the like for a little while longer. There's been some adjustments to those, recognizing how well you all appreciate those features now. They are coming, but what you would normally experience in the chambers and then some will be available to us beginning in April. So just throwing that out there, start thinking about those possibilities. And it does sort of change how we do business getting back in person as a group, both good and maybe to some degree bad. So, but we could talk about that a little bit more formally at the meeting on the 15th.
I heard there are free meals during city council meetings.
Yeah, we actually provide food to the mayor and council. That has been our practice. We are certainly out of that practice of late, so we will have to kick the dust off of that. But yes, that is what we traditionally do.
All right. Anything else?
No, that does it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, city manager. Mayor and council items. Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, just one referral item, and that is a budget response report for taxi vouchers for the elderly and for the handicapped. I have a constituent, she's 84. She has real problems taking the wave and the bus system. So I was hoping that we could find out how much it would cost, like Hermosa, and I think I want to say Torrance or somebody else has this stuff.
Yeah, I believe Torrance does as well.
Taxi, Uber. How about taxi, Uber, or wait? What's the last one?
Lyft.
Lyft. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
agreements with the.
I'll second that.
Yeah, the voucher program can apply to a variety of ride services.
All right.
Okay, that's it.
Is it? Oh, it's a BRR. You don't need a second. All right.
No.
All right. Councilmember Horvath.
No, thank you.
All right. Councilmember MD.
No, thank you.
All right. I just request one BRR. Discussed it with Mr. Klein already, but there was a request after I posted about the skate park coming that the kids need a place for shade over here. And I know I'd previously asked for BRR for other shade structures and I withdrew it because I saw that there's these umbrellas here. But one easy shade structure we could do that doesn't require the erection of a new structure is putting some sort of film, tennis court film over these. Now I know that it's that it would prevent visibility for the police looking over. So maybe it's strips of it, or else, you know, like one section of the fence has it, one section doesn't. But kids, parents like to have, the nannies like to have shade over here, ideally, especially in the morning when the sun's, or in the noontime when the sun's super bright. So if we could get a BRR on the cost of doing that, and if not that strips, then something that's translucent, but at least provides some sort of UV protection. That would be a nice upgrade for folks.
Yeah, we can look into a few different possibilities there. There might be a few different ways to tackle that.
Councilman, just to clarify, which location were we?
Oh, sorry. Yes, Perry Park.
Perry Park.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. And I don't have anything else for this meeting. And
Yeah, you need to adjourn in memory.
yes. Do we?
T1.
I see.
And just a reminder to everybody, we are adjourning to the 15th, not the 8th. I think everybody knows that, but.
All right. So we are adjourning in memory of Christian Desire Duluth, retired Redondo Beach police officer. All right. Motion to adjourn.
Second. Second.
All right. Any objections? All right. We're adjourned in memory of Officer Christian Desire Duluth. Thank you, everybody.
Nice vacation.
Thank you.